Navigating Disruption. That was the theme for the 21st Columbia Africa Conference, which took place at the Columbia Business School in New York City. The conference is a student-led collaboration between Columbia Business School, Columbia Engineering, Columbia School of International and Public Affairs, Columbia Mailman School of Public Health, Columbia Law School, and the wider Columbia Africa community. Over the last 21 years, we have provided a forum for meaningful engagement and thought-provoking discussions. This year had an impressive lineup of speakers, and participants left with a renewed sense of hope for Africa's success and were inspired to do their part in moving the continent forward.
Thank you all for being here today. We've officially kicked off the 21st Columbia Africa Conference, and the speakers are here, and we came here for the prompt arrival. And I would leave the mic to our co-president, Conte Lawson, to welcome you all, and then the conference chairs, the other conference chairs would come and give intros before the speakers have come there. Please come in.
Thank you, everyone. I'm not actually here to give a speech. I was trying to do the same thing he was doing. So we're just going to start in the next minute or two. I think all the thanks that need to be given are going to be given by our conference chairs who are going to come up, or some of them are going to come up and welcome us and kick off the conference. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for being here. I've introduced myself already. For those who weren't here, my name is Tonte Lawson. I am the co-president of the Africa Business Club, which is at CBS. I know we have our members here. I was expecting a big shout out. And I'll hand it over to my co-president to introduce himself.
So hey everybody, thank you for being here today. Eunice Sancho, co-president of Africa Business Club.
So there's going to be a time where the conference chairs are going to actually introduce themselves one by one, but to give this opening remarks, and thank you again for being here, of course, I want to welcome Chiaka, Bridget, and Ayeki, who are going to give opening remarks. These are some of the conference chairs. Please give them a big round of applause.
Hi everyone. Oh my God, it's so quiet. My name is Chiaka Oswala. I'm a second year MBA candidate at Columbia Business School institution. And we're so happy to bring this conference to you today. The conference team and I have put in a lot of hard work into this, and we're so excited to share with you. I'm so happy seeing all your beautiful faces. You guys look so good and so ready to hear everything that's going to go on for these 2 days or 1.5 days. So I want to talk about the theme of the conference briefly. Why did we choose this theme? The theme of the conference is Navigating Disruption, Strategies for Africa's Resilience and Transformation. And we chose this theme because of everything happening on the continent, from the Kenyan finance bill to climate change to the rise of technological advancements like AI and ChatGPT. We are very excited about what we can do with this theme for the next 1.5 days. And we're very excited, we're very thrilled to welcome you here today. Throughout these 2 days, we have created a range of keynotes and panels and breakout sessions, and also the Afro Gala that we're going to have at the conference. And we look forward to having you guys there. I'm going to pass the floor now to Aiki Asimbe, our other conference co-chair, and she'll give you more background about the conference.
Good evening, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Wezon, Gabite, Karibu, Akwaba, My name is Aiki Asimbe, and on behalf of the entire Columbia Africa Conference team, it is both my honor and pleasure to welcome you all tonight at the 21st Annual Columbia Africa Conference. Before we begin, I would like to thank you all for being here. I'd also like to take a moment to express our heartfelt gratitude to many stakeholders who have made today's gathering possible. We extend our sincerest thanks to our partners and sponsors, as well as the departments and administrations across Columbia schools who have provided our clubs with essential support, resources, contacts, funding, and guidance throughout the whole planning process. We are also grateful to our esteemed speakers, many of whom have traveled from across the U.S. and the African continent. Their commitment to youth empowerment, the advancement of Africa, and their pursuit of excellence is evident in their willingness to invest their time and resources to be here. This conference would not be possible without the generous support and dedication of these individuals and institutions. Their unwavering commitment to fostering meaningful dialogue and collaboration is invaluable, and we're deeply appreciative of their contributions. Launched in 2004, the Columbia Africa Conference, previously known as the African Economic Forum, has a rich history that began as a modest gathering aimed at fostering dialogue among scholars and practitioners focused on African development. This conference is a cross-school collaboration involving Columbia Business School, the School of International and Public Affairs, the School of Engineering, the Mailman School of Public Health, and the Law School. Over the years, it has evolved into the largest Africa-focused event at Columbia. Each year, the African community at Columbia and in the surrounding areas eagerly anticipate this platform to discuss and explore the continent's dynamic economic landscape along with its challenges and opportunities. This year's theme, Navigating Disruption, was chosen to reflect Africa's unique position at the intersection of unprecedented global and local changes. By delving into this topic, the conference aims to equip students and young professionals with actionable solutions that empower African nations to transform disruptions into opportunities for meaningful change and long-term prosperity. Over the next few days, we will engage in insightful discussions on a range of critical topics. I urge all of you to actively participate in these sessions, share your insights, and collaborate with your fellow colleagues. Moreover, I also encourage you to take the discussions and lessons learned here into your respective professions. Together, we can harness our collective expertise to spark conversations that lead to actionable solutions, ensuring that Africa not only navigates disruptions, but thrives in the evolving global landscape. I will now hand over the floor to my conference co-chair, Bridget Asante, to introduce our keynote speaker.
Hello everyone. As I mentioned, my name is Grace Asante, and I'm one of the conference co-chairs from Columbia Business School. To begin our pivotal discussions, it's a great honor to introduce our keynote speaker. the United Nations Special Advisor on Africa to the Secretary General, Under Secretary General Christina Duarte. Her Excellency brings an unparalleled depth of insight into Africa's evolving landscape and the pathways to sustainable growth. With over 3 decades of leadership in both public policy and the private sector, she has continuously advocated for a transformative approach to policy making in Africa, emphasizing the importance of development financing, technological advancement, and digital integration as catalysts for growth. Her leadership has underscored governance and domestic resource mobilization as essential pillars for empowering the continent, with human capital as the driving force behind effective policy making. When our team envisioned the ideal person to open this conference and to set the tone for our discussions, Ms. Duarte's visionary profile made her the obvious choice. Though Her Excellency could not join us in person tonight, she has prepared a special video message for us and sent a representative to speak on her behalf. We look forward to hearing their valuable insights on navigating disruption and harnessing innovation to build a prosperous future. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Director Jean-Paul Adam, Director for Policy, Monitoring and Advocacy in the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, to the United Nations General Secretary. Let's put our hands together as we welcome him.
Good evening to you all, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak today on behalf of the Under Secretary General, who will also be following with the message. So allow me to briefly introduce myself, because I'm sure you don't know me. I am Jean-Paul Adam, and I'm currently working with Christina Duarte, the Under Secretary General, and I'm formerly a Minister of Foreign Affairs, of Finance, and of Health of the Republic of Seychelles. And for those who have not heard of Seychelles, it's Africa's smallest country. There's only 100,000 people. It's off the east coast of Africa. And I'm very delighted to join so many students from Africa who are here, but also people who share the goal of seeing a transformed African continent. So I'm delighted to share a few thoughts ahead of the keynote address to be delivered through the recording of the Under Secretary General, Christina Duarte. So first of all, I would like to commend you for placing Africa's priorities at the forefront of your agenda while navigating the disruptions which you have alluded to in the theme. We need to approach resilience building and transformation with great intentionality, because more than ever, it is clear that the transformation that we need will not emerge either from a handout or from an imposition from outside. The transformation can only come from within Africa itself. It is evident that Africa has the least resilience to global shocks, whether they be pandemics, economic shocks, or the existential threat represented by climate change. While the world is recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, the recovery in Africa, unfortunately economically, has a slightly different trajectory. Yes, we have growth, but Africa is on the cusp of a debt crisis. Debt service costs in Africa have doubled since 2020. 40% of African countries are spending more on debt service than they are on health. Africa is vulnerable, but Africa is far from powerless. And in this moment where we are navigating disruption, Africa can chart the way for others to follow. For we are at a crossroads, both in terms of geopolitics, as well as in terms of development. Our Under Secretary General, who you'll be hearing from in her message very shortly, has often remarked that the Africa we want is the Africa that the world needs. Africa holds the key to more even and more sustained global growth through its natural resource endowments, but perhaps even more critically, through its demographic dividend. By 2050, in the 15 to 34 age group bracket, the number of young Africans is expected to increase by 73%. In that same period, and in that same age group globally, the growth is only going to be 6%. The future is literally African. So how do we unlock this opportunity? Firstly, we need to make sure that everyone understands that a sustainable global future is anchored in Africa's success. This means a dismantling of the extractive nature of Africa's economic relationship with the rest of the world, which started with colonialism. The Under-Secretary General will share with you our office's work on Africa's three paradoxes: paradox of finance, of food, and energy. In these three areas, Africa faces the paradox of potential abundance, but a failure to be able to effectively mobilize these resources. So we must ask, what are our strategies to deliver the resilience and transformation needed? Most critically, we must strengthen African country systems to mobilize the resources which belong to Africa, but which do not currently serve Africa. There are 500 to 600 billion US dollars leaving the continent annually through a variety of forms: illicit financial flows, inefficient taxation, extortionate debt servicing, or trade mispricing. All of these can be harnessed through strengthening our institutions and also using opportunities, for example, provided by digital technologies. Meanwhile, connecting the almost 600 million Africans without access to electricity will provide one of the most significant boosts possible to economic productivity. And with around 65% of the world's arable land in Africa, the continent can feed itself while also generating meaningful economic opportunities for the bulk of the population currently engaged in subsistence farming. In conclusion, I hope that the Under-Secretary General's reflections can contribute towards how Africa can develop its own navigational aids in this era of disruption. Disruption heightens vulnerability, but also brings opportunity. This opportunity can transform the way we think about Africa and the way we want Africa to not just react to global events, but how we see Africa shaping them. Thank you for allowing me to make this brief introduction, and we look forward to your comments and questions and suggestions in reaction to this Under-Secretary General's remarks. Thank you very much.
21st Africa Conference. The trajectory of Africa's development has been and continues to be marked by challenges and paradoxes. As we look toward the future and work together to accelerate Africa's progress, we must reflect on the continent's past. This is crucial if you want to examine how Africa can navigate disruption, build resilience, and transform its economies to meet the aspirations of its people. Therefore, this discourse will explore Africa's journey from the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, to the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. It will look at how resilience has not been built, dissect the role of state absence in hampering development, and finally, delve into Africa's triple paradox, the interlinked challenge of finance, energy, and food systems impacting the continent's development. First, let's focus on sustainable development from the MDGs to the SDGs and how they reflect the need to build resilience, or how resilience has not been built. Africa's progress on the MDGs highlights the critical importance of resilience in achieving development goals. The MDGs were aimed to deliver immediate improvements in health, education, and poverty reduction. At the same time, they were also expected to enhance the capacity of individuals, communities, and nations to withstand future crises. Unfortunately, in Africa's case, the continent's persistent inability to build resilience proved to be a major obstacle. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, while there was some progress, particularly in areas like primary education, where enrollment increased from 52% in 1990 to 80% in 2015, the continent did not achieve the desired outcomes. Nearly 50% of the population still lived on less than $1.25 a day by 2015, underscoring the failure to meet poverty reduction goal. As the global focus shifts to the more ambitious SDGs, Africa's struggles continue. The Sustainable Development Solutions Network, SDNS, reveals sobering data from their monitoring. 17 of the 20 lowest performing countries globally are African. And even more worrying trend shows that nearly half of the Africa's SDG targets are either off track or have made no significant progress. Unfortunately, this further demonstrates the continent's vulnerability due to lack of resilience. So building resilience in Africa remains not only a developmental necessity, but an urgent priority. Without this foundation, the continent risks further regression as future disruptions emerge, whether in the form of economic shocks, environmental crisis, or political instability. Second, let's discuss how Africa has not delivered on the MDGs and is off track on the SDGs, focusing particularly on the role of state absence. The absence of an effective, capable state is a critical reason behind Africa's underperformance in achieving the MDGs, which put the continent at a vulnerable starting point for the SDGs. State absence refers to the lack of governance, infrastructure, and institutional frameworks needed to deliver essential services. In turn, this hampers resilience. In fragile states, this void creates a vacuum that non-state actors are quick to claim, undermining the state's legitimacy and weakening its ability to sustain long-term development. Historical colonial administrations established state systems focused on security control and resource extraction, only two functions. This left a large portion of African territories with minimal governance, a legacy that persists today. Countries like the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Somalia exhibit the highest level of state fragility and conflict. On the other hand, countries like Botswana, Mauritius, with more stable and effective governance structures, have demonstrated higher levels of resilience. This contrast highlights the importance of strong, inclusive state structures in delivering development outcomes. The absence of such structures creates an environment where development initiatives are often unsustainable, leading to a cycle of poverty, instability, and underdevelopment. For Africa to move forward, it is imperative that the state reestablishes its presence by delivering essential service, strengthening institutions, and enforcing political stability. Third, let's finally explore Africa's triple paradox and exchange on the root causes of why the state has been absent. Africa's development challenge can be encapsulated by what we refer to in our 2023 flagship reports on the continent's development as the triple paradox. This is the complex interplay between financing, energy, and food system challenges to feed into each other, exacerbating state absence and undermining resilience across Africa. The financing paradox lies in the fact that despite the continent's abundant financial resources, many African countries remain trapped in a cycle of debt distress and external dependency. In fact, African countries lose around $500 billion annually through illicit financial flows, tax evasion and avoidance, inefficient public spending and tax exemptions, mismanagement of pension funds and carbon markets. This figure is more than the combined GDP of 35 countries on the continent. This reliance on external sources of finance prevents African states from achieving the financial autonomy needed to invest in infrastructure, build robust institutions, and ensure public service delivery. The energy paradox is another significant obstacle. Africa is reaching oil, gas, and renewable energy potential, yet nearly 600 million people on the continent lack access to reliable electricity. This energy deficit hampers industrialization, economic development, and job creation. Without sufficient energy infrastructure, Africa cannot absorb the 18 million young people entering the labor market each year. This further limits the continent's ability to achieve sustainable development. The global narrative has also imposed a green energy straitjacket on Africa, creating an unsustainable trade-off between delivering the NDCs and delivering development. This green energy straitjacket requires huge upfront investments, but at the same time, it makes quasi-commercial or commercial lending the only available on a continent where many countries are not investment-grade countries. So the global narrative tells Africa to go all in. Yet at the same time, Africa's renewable energy investment at $55 billion between 2010 and 2020 accounted for just 2.4% of global renewable energy investments, which total almost $2.3 trillion. While regions like North Africa and Southern Africa led the continent's efforts, the overall investment disparity remains vast. Globally, renewable energy investment was approximately 40 times higher than Africa's share during this period, despite Africa holding 60% of the world's best solar resources, but only 1% of installed solar photovoltaic or PV capacity. The food systems paradox completes the triad. Despite possessing vast agricultural resources, Africa continues to face food insecurity, poor infrastructure, weak market linkage, and inadequate investment in agriculture technology prevents smallholder farmers from accessing large markets. As a result, Africa's food system remains vulnerable, often creating political instability as food shortages exacerbate social tensions. To address these interconnected paradoxes, the role of the state must be redefined and reinvigorated. States must be capacitated to exercise their primary functions, ensuring political stability, delivering services, and fostering economic growth. Key interventions such as improving domestic resource mobilization, enhancing public finance management, and investing in technology and natural resource management are critical to breaking the cycle of underdevelopment. In conclusion, Africa's path to resilience and transformation requires bold strategies and a renewed commitment to state building. The challenge posed by the triple paradox of finance, energy, and food systems are significant, but they are not insurmountable. By addressing these critical issues, African nations can not only navigate today's disruption, but also build a more resilient and prosperous future for tomorrow. The United Nations Secretary General said, the 21st century is poised to be Africa's century. Let's rise to the challenge and work together to deliver on his goal. I wish you a fruitful, action-oriented conference. Thank you very much.
I think before I proceed, I would like us to give another round of applause to Director. That was truly inspiring, and I know that if I let you guys, you will ask questions tomorrow. Just know that if you still have some questions for the Director, you can send them to us. You have our email. We take Venmo and Zelle. We're charging. That's okay. But more seriously, I think before we break out and go for our network reception, it is important to say that we will have a lot of panels tomorrow that are covering similar topics. So save the questions for them. I'm sure they'll get answered at some point over the course of 1.5 days. So thank you again. Before we break out for our networking reception, I will hand the floor over to one of our sponsors. Before I do that. So before I continue, I would like to first of all thank VM Global TV, our media partners and sponsors who are covering this entire event. You will find some of them in front here, and they have a short message for you, which is quite interesting as well. So I'll say the details for them, and they'll also provide details about where you can actually catch this coverage. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce the CEO of VM Global TV. She's also the CEO of Global Net Media Maven, and she's an author, speaker, executive producer, director, a TEDx speaker, and she's also the talk show host of the VO show. Please welcome VO.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I love some energy. So honored to be here. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Tonte. It is an absolute honor for the Global TV team to be here to cover this extraordinary conference, and we are looking forward to being with you all this weekend. Give yourselves a round of applause before I As Tonte said, my name is Vuyo Chimoda. I am the founder and the CEO of the VM Global TV Network, which was founded in South Africa in the year 2020 and officiated by the President of South Africa and the Department of Arts and Culture in the country. Founded by myself, 22 years old at the time, in my childhood bedroom in Cape Town, and with a desk, a chair, a ring light, and an iPhone 8, which is where this entire TV network began. With a vision to see the future of media and entertainment, one that is global. The future of media and entertainment that is unapologetically and envisions itself in the global ecosystem and playing field.
I'm the kind of young person who likes songs like You Want to Bamba, You Want to Chill with the Big Boys, because I see myself chilling with the big boys, which is why I made the move to New York City almost 2 years ago, to see this vision come to life, and which is why we are here today. Today, 4 years later, VN Global is a network that comprises of the VN Global TV channel on Roku and Fire TV, the VN Global Media and Entertainment Awards, which are set to take place in 2025. We have an equipped studio, production studio, and a passionate crew and team that loves the media and entertainment industry as much as I do. On our 24-hour TV channel, we broadcast global lifestyle content, shows that envision a cross-continental collective, shows that show our difference, as well as our similarities as people in our diverse selves. We have talk shows, reality shows, culinary shows, we have podcasts, music-related shows, fashion-related shows, and so much more in this TV channel. And all of these have one goal in mind, which is going global. Going global not necessarily physically, but the reimagining of how stories, voices, and talents could transcend barriers and borders, but in and of themselves being enough to be enjoyed and understood by a global audience. On our platform, we collaborate with creatives and storytellers who have a similar vision. Those who see themselves, their stories, and their voices worth being seen and worth being told in a global scale. The brave and unapologetic ones who are passionate about the craft and about storytelling and culture, those are the people that we work with at this network. To make this happen, we've worked hard on creating an ecosystem necessary to make VN Global a home for many creatives across continents. From the Curly Sue cooking show, which is a vegan show filmed in London, to Marcus, who is a podcast host with an acclaimed show that speaks to filmmakers in South Africa, to Abby and her girls on a reality show in Canada, and so many more, including our incredible team, some of them which are here. Marcus was behind the camera, who is part of our team, and an upcoming showrunner and producer, as well as Remy sitting right next to him, who is an aspiring journalist from the country of Uganda. We definitely are talking about going global. Those are some of the talented people and creators that we are proud to represent and to work with on this network. And from our equipped production studio in Brooklyn, our passionate crew and team, and our TV channel, we distribute and create magic together for a north of 6 million viewers that are recorded on the platform thus far. With that, we are confident and comfortable to say that we are not just the future of media and entertainment in the global sphere, but we are the now. We are a testament of the theme of this conference, navigating disruption, and in our own right and in our industry, showcasing resilience and transformation. We therefore invite creatives to join our community. As the media partners of this incredible conference, we are proud to offer one lucky attendee of this conference an opportunity to win their own TV show. Production, studio, and crew, distribution, all set just for you. We are doing this. We're doing this in an interesting way with a raffle. So we're going to be inviting you from tomorrow to go ahead, go back home, or think about the idea that you've always dreamed of being on TV, and write it down, including your name and contact details, and at the registration desk tomorrow, drop it into our raffle. We invite you to also follow us on social media, particularly Instagram on VN_global, or watch on our TV channel, both on Roku and Fire TV. And as Tonte had mentioned, this conference is going to be covered on the channel and soon will be aired on the channel as well. So when you see us with our camera, do smile, because you're going to be on TV. The winner of the TV show raffle will be announced tomorrow in the closing remarks, so make sure that you come tomorrow, enter, and stay tuned at the end of the conference to find out if you are the winner. Have a fantastic evening, and thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, VN Global, thank you, Vuyo. So like she said, if you see the cameras, please do smile and please don't do anything stupid. Thank you. So with that, I think that more or less wraps up the business end of, you have a question?
Yes.
Oh, is that for me?
What if we are interested in the TV show but won't be here tomorrow?
Oh, well, you can talk to her maybe after the show. I'm sure she'll provide it with it. I think you're asking me a question now, but I'm not ready for that. So, with that, I think that wraps up the business end of tonight. Thank you all for being here. And we have a reception in special honor of our alumni for all of you. Maybe you'll meet some of them there. Just like canapé and drinks. Very limited drinks. We don't want any issues tonight. So thank you all for coming and see you at the reception. We're going to take a selfie right here with our speaker and the rest of you. So if you can just kind of converge in the middle, and we'll try and take an awesome selfie like we do on TV.
I do think it just makes it easier to like see people, like to see designers, to have their work put out there, and to not have to wait on, you know, them making it to getting validation from some of these, you know, historic European houses and things like that. I think if you want to, you can find Nigerian designers that are making quality clothing with like real, not polyester fabric, and it is like quality that is going to last, and they're doing it in a sustainable way. And oftentimes you have to use social media to find them. Oftentimes people do find out about these brands and designers through social media. So I think that it's honestly changed the game for a lot of designers and made it such that if you have talent and if you have something good and if you have good products, you can pick up a phone and share it with the world.
Yeah, I echo what Annie said. I think one of the great things about social media is that it increases accessibility, especially in a field like dermatology where there's so few of us. I feel like my family members in Nigeria are constantly reaching out to me about certain like skin and hair concerns, and I'm often able to help them, but I'm like, isn't there a dermatologist that could like see you and like physically evaluate you? And they're like, we don't know where to find them. So I feel like the beauty of social media is that it allows places that are far away, such as Nigeria, to be more reachable and more accessible. And I feel like that's why it's important for content to be geared towards our people, because, you know, I feel like the skin, it's like the most external part of you, right? It's what people see, it affects people's self-esteem, and that's why I feel like it's so important to address those issues, because I feel like the beauty of it too is that once people are better, you can see a difference in their confidence, their self-esteem, how they perceive themselves, and that's been really beautiful to see as well.
I mean, I learned how to do makeup on YouTube, you know, in middle school and all that. I want to get a raise of hands. How many of you learned fashion and beauty on like social media? Yeah. But like with these, I feel like social media is such a great tool to be able to learn things. But I think things are so finicky. Like it's like something is a trend now and then it's gone. And do you think like how can we balance that, wanting to learn, but also these trends evolving like all the time? Like even with skincare, you know, we had the 10 beauty skincare, Korean skincare routine, and then now we have something else like kojic acid and all of that. So it's just like things are evolving every day. Like how do we balance that?
I think you always have to have the understanding, like the message or the idea looming in the background of everything is there's always going to be someone trying to sell you something. Like, and that's oftentimes where a lot of these trends are coming from, right? Like we see certain ingredients trending, and maybe you can speak to this, but sometimes we see certain ingredients trending. As someone who works with skincare brands often,
I'm like, okay, this is a hot new skincare ingredient, like, some of you guys have gotten it patented or something, and now that's why we're like, this is the thing that's gonna make your skin like look young for 20 more years. And I'm like, okay, well, I love that science has brought this new ingredient to the forefront, but because I have the awareness that someone is always going to be selling me something, I, knowing myself, can say, well, I have a skincare routine that works for me. Like, I look in my mirror and I like the skin that I see. I don't think there's anything wrong here. So, it's up to me to decide whether or not I want to jump on a new ingredient trend, or whether I want to wait and see what other people who jump on it experience and actually deal with, and maybe ultimately later decide to experience for myself, or if I just want to opt out altogether, because I'm always going to have the option to jump on a new trend. Like, if one trend isn't for me, I can opt out, because there's always going to be something that's trending. So I think the way you balance it is just by having that knowledge that we live in a capitalist society that's always going to try and sell us something, and they're going to sell us something through the idea of trends.
Totally, I agree with that. I think, especially for brown skin, less is more, because Annie's right, they will try to sell you stuff. And the beauty of people like derms or content creators is that oftentimes we are not buying the products, we are getting it shipped to us. And so that's also something that I think consumers need to be mindful of as they're watching content, that a lot of times that it's being donated essentially to the content creators. But I think in black skin, it's super sensitive, less is more. I understand the need or the urge to want to add on other things, but then sometimes you mix one acid with another acid, an AHA with a PHA, and then you have more hyperpigmentation than what you started with, and then you're confused. So I tell my patients less is more, start slow, you can add one product at a time. But I think we have to be careful with these trends that pop up, because everyone's skin is different. They might work for some people, but they might not work for everyone. For example, I feel black skin is what everyone's trying to achieve. And it's I thought I had that, but my skin was oily. But is that black skin? I don't know. So I feel we just have to be mindful of trends and understand that trends are cool, but not every trend might work with our skin. And over time, I feel I myself and also my patients, I've taught them to learn what works for their skin, especially in black melanated skin. I feel we have to be more cautious in comparison to other groups of people.
Emeka, there's this movement of Africa to the world, Nigeria to the world fashion. How do you balance what is the role of cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation, and in the expansion of African fashion to globally, and how can African creatives like you navigate this dynamic?
It's great that everyone wants to promote African culture positively, because now we have more African artists doing great music. We have African culture is being seen more globally on YouTube. People learn about African history, prior to slavery, and learn about the great empires we had. So now people want to associate with Africa more, which is great. So it's good to appreciate our culture. So it's not appropriation, because sometimes I have white people say, hey, I want to buy your outfit, but I'm white, so I can't do it. People might say that I'm appropriating black culture, but they expect my clothes, but they want to buy it, but they might be seen as appropriation, which they don't want to do. But personally, I think that it's great to appreciate African culture. I want the whole world to wear African clothes in Asia, Australia, America, Europe, Africa, South America, Middle East. I want us all to wear African culture, African clothing, and to promote the culture in a positive way. So me personally, I don't mind people wearing it. I want to be respected. They don't have to making fun of us, dancing, funny, trying to make fun of African culture, African people. As long as you respect the culture, the heritage, and you give appreciation to where it's coming from, then I don't mind it. So personally, I think it's great to have Africa or Nigeria to the world. We can appreciate our culture and heritage and value our fashion.
I agree, and I think an important thing for me is credit. That is the distinction between appreciation and appropriation. Coming in and saying, oh, I like this fabric, and then you're wearing it, and then a certain demographic, once they wear it, getting more getting more eyes on them. It's you can use that opportunity to direct people to the history and the culture and the context. Or you can say, yeah, look, don't I have great style? I found this myself and it looks great on me. And then that's the issue, because you're not acknowledging the history, you're not acknowledging the people who came up with it. So like seeing sometimes designers, like high-end designers, whether it's like, I don't know, like maybe like Gucci or what, I've seen designers and you're like, that's Ankara, like what is going on? I'm like, what is going on here? Like, are you gonna acknowledge it, or are you gonna save it, or are you just gonna sell a piece of clothing that we know where it comes from for $2,000 when there are people who are selling it for less and been selling it for less and have been doing this for years, and you have not acknowledged that context, that culture at all. So I think that's the real important distinction between that appropriation and appreciation.
It's like hard to navigate. Like, do we gatekeep our culture, or if we open it to the world, are they gonna steal it and like reinvent it of their own? But yeah, I mean, it's a conversation that we keep leaving. I want to open it.
Hi everyone, my name is Marvelous Mary. I'm an attorney, but I focus on the sports and entertainment industry where I work, because being Nigerian and being someone who sports has done so much for me in my life, I'm thinking of like, how can I contribute to that growing space and help to, make it be the industry that I know that it can be, especially whether like they want to invest in like a sports league, or they want to invest in a sports entity, or whether it's a big corporate company or sports apparel company and they want to merge or acquire, literally anything that you can think of.
Opportunity that I first saw for both fans of the game as well as aspiring athletes. And waking up by 3 a.m. to watch NBA games is insane, and I've done that most of my life. So to think that in a couple of years we were going to be producing local content for Africa by Africans was extremely exciting. And I was speaking to so many people about the different sectors in sports, whether it's from the legal aspect or maybe in broadcasting or in medicine, have to work hand in hand and at the same time simultaneously to actually develop this ecosystem so that we can harness the potential, the economic prospects of sports and the potential for the
you can speak to specifically as it relates to women, how USAID is ensuring that its financing, especially through DIV, is reaching women-led entrepreneurs directly rather than being diluted by intermediaries. And what is USAID doing to make sure that women in Africa know that this funding is available, are applying because they do have ideas and they do have innovations, ventures that are underfunded, that they are doing this work. What is USAID doing to that? What does it look like in terms of DIV, women-led innovation ventures?
Great, thank you so much for that question. I think quickly before I answer that, I want to thank you for the shout out to Ampersand, because DIV actually provided early catalytic financing for Ampersand. And I think that, thank you. I think that provides an example of, we don't want, as you were talking about, we don't want people to be grant dependent, so we provide catalytic funding so that they can scale through the public or private sector. So it's very exciting for me to be on Rwandair and then see a story about Ampersand and then go to Rwanda and see, as you said, Ampersand all around, since we aren't funding them anymore, but they've had great success. And I think that's a great example of how DIV funding can be catalytic as well as other financing. So to your question, USAID continues to prioritize gender equality and women's empowerment. We have a new policy from last year around advancing gender equality and empowerment and strengthening our operational and programmatic frameworks around that. A lot of that is actually through our GenDev Hub, which is not DIV, but who provides cross-sectoral expertise and technical assistance to teams across the agency, including DIV. So all of our projects go through a gender review. I work primarily in agriculture, and so our agriculture projects from the beginning are working to include female farmers, crops that are traditionally grown by female farmers, including women. One of the organizations we fund is Midie/Shamba Shepa, very popular in Kenya, but we're funding its expansion into Uganda and making sure to include female local perspectives in every single episode of their shows, which are agricultural extension shows, training farmers in different techniques, including regenerative techniques. So the GenDev Hub also has the Gender Equity and Equality Action Fund. So this is outside of DIV, but they've reached more than 500,000 people since launching in 2021 and supported over 3,100 women-owned micro enterprises to access loans bank accounts and other services. I think to DIV specifically, we can and do support directly many women-led organizations. So we have fixed amount awards, which are milestone based. We figure out the milestones with the grantees, and they also have less hefty reporting requirements than many USAID awards. So this allows smaller organizations that may not be able to get funding from other parts of the from the agency to work with DIV. One example of an award that we're doing particularly around women's empowerment is actually in India. So this is a new award. We have, I think, 30 awards that we're announcing soon, and it is a build-on of a study of India's rural workfare program, and a study a few years ago gave women were doing this work, but then were potentially losing their wages because they didn't have a bank account, and researchers researchers worked with the government to both give women bank accounts, their wages were deposited directly into this, and then help train women to use this bank accounts. And then they found that women had more control over wages and empowerment measures in the long term as well, because this was conducted in, I believe, 2013. And so our new project is now, because of this program is expanding, is testing new models of this version at scale with researchers with a plan to expand this with the partnership from the government. As you discussed, it's important that this doesn't happen in a vacuum if it's just researchers going out and doing research for research's sake, but they're partnering with the state government to try to find the best way to ensure that these women can have control over their wages.
Thank you so much. Last question before I open it up for audience Q&A. I wanted to end with this question to you, Michael. So as a Cameroonian American myself, born in the US passport, US citizenship, parents immigrated to the US almost 30 years ago now. I know that is something that many of us in this room can relate to. And oftentimes we can feel like our own governments back home in Africa do not recognize us, and maybe equally as well that the US government doesn't as well, because the US government know that the African diaspora, is a unique dynamic population to engage and to elevate, and how so.
As the partnerships necessary to scale either with the public sector, with the national or regional or county governments, and that they're thinking through the scaling strategy both in terms of their private sector, whether they're actually going to be making money, and then also through these partnerships.
Take kind of that question. I would say, well, first of all, I believe in venture and risk-based financing, but I also, because of the position I'm in, know that the perception of risk in Africa is an obstacle to Africans getting funded. And so if I were to say a successful use, or something that should be done, for large infrastructure with very cost sensitive to the cost of capital, if you can somehow quantify the public good that gets delivered, that public good should be funded with public money, and then allow the private sector capital to flow to fill the gap once it's de-risked. But that doesn't really apply so well to venture. But I do think there is a lot of money that tries to go and help set up ecosystems, and I think some of it's misdirected. You end up getting a lot of entrepreneurs that chase grants rather than chase successful business models. What I'd rather see is the first investment by any new LP or angel investor or any new entry into an African vehicle somehow be de-risked, because once people got into Africa, I believe they would stay and invest more. And I also think that's true for African capital. There's a lot of African capital that prefers to be here, New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ rather than in Africa. So I think we need to figure out how to better de-risk new LP, limited partner or new direct investment into African vehicles, funds, or direct, into startups. I would prefer to see that than the sort of somewhat less than entirely helpful, not this one, At the very early stages, some grants do make sense, but you start to see companies that get to be fairly large and they have a cost structure because they've had so much grant money that is not sustainable in terms of scaling a business. The reason I say people would stay is because the investments that we're in are all doing very well, and yet nobody would expect that. If I tell you that one of them has gone from 14 million health records, digitized health records, to 41 million in 4 months, or I tell you that a fintech in Uganda is scaling at 10 to 20% per month, I'd say those are good investments, right? And that's just in our first few investments, and then the next one I'm looking at is even faster in Tanzania. So the question is how you get people over that mental hurdle.
Thank you. And so, Michael, just following up on your question, you speak about the risk of investments in Africa, and my mind goes immediately to crisis and conflict agreements on the continent. And so, you're from Sudan, and as we know right now, Sudan is in the midst of a terrible humanitarian crisis due to conflict in the country, with millions displaced inside and outside of Sudan, devastating rates of sexual violence, and famine as well as being declared within the country. And so, given your experience with African Renaissance Ventures and also working with the transitional government of Sudan, how can venture capital, in your opinion, be strategically leveraged to mitigate risks associated with investing in conflict-affected regions, such as in the Horn of Africa? And furthermore, what approaches can be taken to ensure that this financing not only scales local entrepreneurship, but also actively contributes to peace building and long-term sustainable development in these volatile environments?
That's a tough question. I'll have to just take a couple quick bites at it, and maybe we can talk a little bit more later. One is that the first thing I said was when I decided that the best way for me to help long-term was to diversify the private sector. It's because in many of these very fragile states, you have private sectors that are captured by government. You have very narrow private sector. If you look at the Arab Spring, whether it been Hadi or Mubarak or many of the other governments, you had a private sector that had really built up around that power, and it could not deliver services. It wasn't responsive to people. It could not deliver the jobs, and then eventually had to be overthrown. But actually, I saw that in Asia with the financial crisis. If you look at Korea and Thailand, very similar links between the private sector and government. And so for me, it is a crisis mitigation, diversifying and building entrepreneurship that is disconnected is one preventative measure against the kind of fragility that I've seen time and time again. Secondly, I would say that going back, if we're to rebuild, looking at Sudan, technology has to be part of it, and entrepreneurs have to be part of it. The core industrial parts of Sudan have been destroyed. How are you going to you can't afford the inefficiency that was there before, so you need to use technology which lowers the cost and increases the speed and efficiency for delivering all kinds of public services. We're not going to rebuild all the schools and hospitals and clinics and old school, middlemen-driven distribution systems. We're going to need technology. But mobile is something that works even in fragile places because it can be modularized. Mobile money as opposed to building out banking systems. So the reason why asset-light stuff can work is because it's frankly less risky. You can get to revenue faster. So I do think it's appropriate for higher risk environments. But let's also be realistic. I'm not investing in Sudan right now. Right? There are a few of the startups we were going to invest in are restarting in a small way. But I'm investing in Uganda and Tanzania and Rwanda. We need stability. So we do need governments we need to stop conflicts, and we need governments to be stable, and to build out that private sector to be less fragile so we don't get into those situations in the first place.
Thank you, Nandi. Siobhan, my next question is to you. So you spoke about conflict just recently, and I know with USAID it's more so focused on development financing. And so I wonder if you can speak to what it looks like in terms of innovations that you've seen that kind of exist at that development humanitarian nexus, and what that looks like in different parts of the continent that are more protracted crisis types of areas. What do you see as the innovations that are coming out of those spaces, and what does that mean?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think similar to what Magdi was talking about, I think most of our investment. So I guess I can explain a little bit more about DIV strategies. So we're an open innovation fund, which means that we accept applications from everywhere, but that also means that we can only fund areas where we can apply from. So we were talking right before the panel about, we fund a lot of people in India, a lot of people in Kenya, and people are often asking, why do you fund so many people in India and Kenya? Are those specific countries that you're focused on? And that's not true, but we get a lot of applications from India, we get a lot of applications from Kenya, and so we can only read the applications that we see. So I think to your question, from many conflict-affected areas, unfortunately, we're not getting many applications. So if you look at our portfolio and you see there's not a lot of funding in these areas, it's not because we don't want to fund or that we cannot fund them, but because we're just not getting as many applications from here. And that's one thing I also wanted to talk about here, is that if you are an entrepreneur anywhere or building a nonprofit, then we can accept your applications.
Thank you, Siobhan. Everybody should be thinking about their idea, so that the DIV, and speak to Siobhan afterwards. So, Michael, my question to you is from U.S. foreign policy side. The U.S. has invested heavily in increasing trade and investments between the U.S. and African economies through initiatives like Prosper Africa and the African Growth and Opportunity Act. How are these policies being tailored to better support youth-led startups and entrepreneurial ecosystems in Africa, especially in sectors like technology and green energy? How are these initiatives contributing to a positive enabling environment for both the U.S. economy as well as in Africa, returns for Africa, not only financially, but as well as development and social benefits as well?
Well, thank you for that question. Particularly as you talk about quantifying and the quality piece. I think the first thing is the approach is youth-centered. So when you're thinking about the approach that we have, it is training, it is development. When we're working through these initiatives that you're talking about, all of them have similar and the same components. It's training, it's development, it's investment, and it's support not only of youth-led ventures, but also civil society organizations, or a lot of the time the youth have leadership roles. I think in addition to that, it's kind of the focus from the USG or the US government on some of those things that you're talking about. Digital, expanding access to, we're not talking about minerals and other things like that. We're talking about digitization, technology, these areas that are more easily accessible to the youth dynamic group. And I think another thing is kind of the breadth of diversity. I think when we're thinking about this, there's not only an acknowledgement in terms of our posture and our approach, the acknowledgement of the contributions, but a focus on, and I hope we get to talk about this later, the diaspora and kind of what role that plays. So when you're talking about the approach, those are the three things that we're centering it. We're making sure that the areas that we're focused on and that we're investing in are areas that are open and be able to be expanded to a certain group, particularly the youth group. And the third piece is being able to take advantage of not only the youth, but the connections and the connectivity that the youth have in the diaspora.
Thank you for that answer. And so since you spoke about digital, you spoke about tech, I wanted to ask another question to Magdi about energy in Africa. And so given the pressing issue of energy insecurity in Africa, with over 600 million Africans without access to electricity, what role do you see for venture capital in funding innovative energy solutions that can enhance resilience in communities? And with the startups that you have, or those that you're looking at in your portfolio, beyond the financial returns, what metrics are you using in order to kind of assess their effectiveness in terms of socially their impact?
Thank you. That's a lot. You got a lot of homework. That's hard. So yeah, we do consider ourselves an impact-focused fund, and so for every deal that we do, part of the terms are what metrics are we going to have you track in order to make sure that we're able to report to our investors that there is impact as well as returns. So, and I think you can't have impact unless you have returns. There's no sense in doing something really beautiful if it hits 1,000 people. It has to scale, and to scale it has to have financial returns. So the first one we did was a company that recycles plastic waste into low carbon building materials, which is used for low income housing, and it reduces plastic, it reduces GHG, reduces the cost of housing. So we track those three things. Healthcare ones, we would do that. But then, you asked about renewables and how is venture helping. I think you have Sun Culture on one of the panels today, so he's probably the best one to answer. But so climate and climate tech is probably now the second or third biggest sector behind fintech in Africa right now, and it's a boom. It's not all 100% panning out, but if you go around Kigali today, you can go to a gas station. There's also a battery swapping station for ampersand motorcycles, and then there's also a charging station from another one called EV Pay or something like that. So you've gone from fuel to two alternative sources of renewables. The big trend, I would say, in terms of renewable energy, particularly solar, is that it's no longer about sort of pay-as-you-go M-COPA style, mobile phone, get a solar panel, be able to charge your phone. It's linked to health, the rural clinics, it's linked to education, it's linked to housing. I was just having lunch today with somebody who's developing in South Africa developments that are all linked to centralized solar power. And then they're going to go into batteries, so then they all 24/7 power. So it's no longer about energy. It's renewable energy is also about healthcare. It's also about education. It's also about housing. It's also about mobility. And these motorcycle drivers are getting 40% reduction in costs. So it's also linked to jobs.
Thank you. My next question is for Siobhan. So, despite global commitments to gender equality, women still face significant barriers to access to development finance. You had mentioned in your previous response about you're not seeing many applications for those in conflict regions. And so that's a barrier for that financing.
Time horizon of what's happened on the continent, even from a tech perspective, and the US, right? Look at the journey of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has been building up to what it is today from the 80s, 90s, right? How quickly did the continent get to where it is relative to how fast the valley got to where it is? And I think that there's something to be said for trying to grow up too fast and how that kind of forces you to actually make a lot of mistakes, yes, but also hit a lot of key milestones a lot quicker than the person you're trying to become, right? I think that that's the thing that I think for me excites me about the continent and tech is that we're making a lot of mistakes and we're trying too hard to copy the Western markets, but we're also realizing that very quickly as well and trying to adjust the venture capital model to fit the African context. And then I think the last thing I'll say as well is, to your point, to agree to some degree, I think that's why we also do need to think a lot about people like us going in diaspora and being in a diaspora context and think about how we work actually with people who are living on the ground. right? Like we can't come here and think about AI and then go back and build AI without having people on those teams who are actually living those problems and breathing those problems day to day. And so I think there's a lot of truth to what you were saying, but I think there's also something to be said for how we can also grow a lot faster by trying to get to where people are at a much quicker pace.
Thank you. Sorry, I just want to make a comment. This is a very productive conversation. We even went a bit over. I did notice that we didn't field any questions from any of the women in the room, although there were a few. So if you could, if the panelists were comfortable, maybe try to encourage them to ask.
Okay. We're out of time, and I've gotten like 10 messages already. So just because she has said it, I'm obliged to get one woman to ask a question. So let's get that. Okay.
Thank you for considering the women. So I'll make this quick. I'm glad that we have a panel that represents both the investors and the founders. And to his point, we are creating models that are more suitable for the African continent. A lot has been said about how the Silicon Valley model is not working in Africa. We need more patient capital and focus on unit economics and efficiencies, etc. So my question is, from the founder perspective, how is the VC model not working for African startups, and what needs to change in order to make the capital more effective so we can attract more funding? Because obviously investors will want to invest if it's productive. From the investor perspective, are these conversations you're having with your LPs, are you asking for longer timeframes for African investments? What are the steps you're taking to adapt the model so that we can have more success stories and attract more capital? Thanks.
I can go really quick on the investor perspective. I think Timmy made a really important point earlier on about the information asymmetry. I think that is by far the biggest hurdle. Like in the VC world, we're trying to understand how to adapt the model here to Africa. So one of the things that we do, for example, is ahead of our IC, we actually have like an IC roundtable where we bring in local African VCs to educate our IC on the trends, the themes, and the companies that are coming to IC from the continent. So we bring in people like Mohammed from Launch Africa, Maya from Progressive, Sumi, who runs Global Africa startups. Like we bring people like that to actually educate folks on, yes, when people think about Africa investing, they think risk, currency depreciation. Okay, but beyond that, what are the opportunities? Like how do we actually quantify the returns? So I think that's the education part is like a huge. It's actually a heavier lift really than like having like an actual like IC meeting. But I think that's my findings.
Ghana for 3 years haven't had any toll services, so transportation services, we don't collect tolls anymore. So I spoke to one of the resources over there. The question that he asked me is, what is it in for me? How do we bridge that primary and the local arms of government, so speaking of the legislation, executive and judiciary, field work has an impact with them. Like you can't cut corners. There are people that want you to grease their hands before you can be able to establish yourself as a startup coming out of business. How do we bridge that gap, and how do we make our ideas a reality in our countries and then go back and give it back? Thank you.
I could take a stab at that question. That's actually a really good question, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think corruption becomes so institutionalized. It's like normalized in a way that it's sickening, right? I think for me personally, one of the first things that I decided to do is I don't take that, and I'm very comfortable about it. Whenever a policeman is like, "Oh, you cut this line, you're going to, I take you to the office. If you don't double us, you $25. I take you to the office." Like I think first and foremost, we need to actually draw the line as this is wrong, and taking a stand for it, and encouraging people around us to take a stand for it. And it sounds lofty, but I'm going to give you a classic example. When I went back to Ghana last year, so now by the way, those who are going to Ghana, they were asking for like a yellow card. If you have a yellow card, they'll pull you into a room, they tell you $300 or get injected on the spot. You say, like, tell them that they should actually do that, and you want to take a photo of the person who's doing that because you want to report it to local authorities. Corruption continues because there's no light to shed on it. Everybody just wants to do it and move another way. A group of friends and I started doing that. Like, we're like, no, we're not. Like, okay, charge me. I'm taking a photo of you. I'm sending it to like the government. I want them to give me an explanation why. The more we press for answers, the more corruption can continue. And I know that it's a lofty answer to give, but I kid you not. I feel like when more and more people start shedding light on this practice is like completely settled with corruption. And the DVLA in Ghana now, you can no longer pay bribes to get a license for free. I'll tell you that for a fact. And that happened because a group of Ghanaian Americans came to the country trying to like get a license. They asked them for bribe. They went on social media and they lauded them. Before you know it, they shut down all the people that were taking money inside. So I would just say, like, using our voice and our power in the diaspora. And yes, it's privilege, but really actually being like standing on business. Like, whatever happens, happens. Taking to court. Last, I'm going back to my New York. You know, I just think that's definitely like the first start.
Hello, my name is Gates Anivina. I study here at Columbia, computer science and math. And I have a question. You said, at Idaho, you said something very interesting. Maybe the one thing that would be beneficial, maybe having more focus on the stuff we do, like maybe data or semiconductors. But the other very interesting thing is the fact that government needs to do their part to produce a good environment for entrepreneurs. So my question is, are you hopeful that maybe the next generation, maybe ours, are going to be the one who make the right choices for our respective country and build that environment? Because even when you look throughout history, the generation who's not in power always have a tendency to say that when we get there, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but we're not going to do more of the same. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the question. So I think everything starts with one thing: we are, right? We are. So just the way probably will not sleep like 4 a.m. I'm trying to solve a problem for money, right? That's natural passion, right? That hunger, right? That's what is needed. So, for instance, every time I travel a lot, right? Because of things I do. And anytime I travel and I see very interesting things, like, this thing is not a big deal. Why can't we have something like this in Nigeria, right? Why can't we have this? Why can't we have that? And I just feel really, really pained, right? It's not a big deal, right? So took Nigeria 60 years, so I'm going to take it from when Nigeria became independent to have this first metro line just 2 years ago, right? Like more than 60 years. What's it been? And they've been thinking about this metro line for more than 30 years. It wasn't a big deal. Something that if there was a deal to really achieve it and get it done, we're going to achieve it. So my point is, for everyone, whether anyone from the future or now, right, the most important thing is you, right, and what you are hungry for. So, and it also goes back to what she said around you need to internalize a lot of things. Who are you? What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? How do you want to impact your community, right? And I think those little things really, really matter. For instance, you look at, she was saying something, I'm also trying to take it back to Nigeria. So there's this minister, Ojo, right? Minister of Interiors. And if you look at, out of all of the ministers, including Fosun, the only person that's actually really done something transformational is that guy. Before you get a Nigerian passport as a Nigerian, whether in Nigeria or diaspora, right? You are going to eat the day you decide to do it, right? And when you do it, that tip them a lot of money. So let's say to get the international passport, it takes maybe it costs $20. probably would have to pay $100. It will not make any sense. Yes, that money going. I never really understood that thing, right? But what that man has been able to do is not only to ensure that you pay the right money, but also the efficiency and how you have used technology to solve the problem, right? And also the system in terms of logistics. How do you even get it? You can stay in your house and they will ship it to you, just pay for it. So it all just takes what we want to achieve. We ourselves, what we want to do. That's real. For instance, I look at what happened in Singapore. Singapore used to be as bad as anything in Africa. You have Singapore now. It's just been very great. Having that hunger is what we want to do. Go ahead to achieve. Right? Yeah.
And what do people like him empower into more offices?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take one last question and we'll wrap it up.
Hi, thank you for your wonderful submissions. I'm very positive, but I also like to be pragmatic, right? It seems whatever the West coughs up, we try to catch that virus and run with it. It's like having an adult and a child, and the West, being the adult, trying to drag us along by anything that they come up with that is more supportive of their journey than ours. So for example, AI is supposed to be an efficiency builder. AI makes things better. It makes existing knowledge better, right? If you go back to Africa, right, we don't have even the basics in place, right? It's a challenge trying to feed our people and be food secure. We literally import all that we eat from outside, even though we produce perhaps most of what the world eats, right? And then the next thing that we hear, we should leave what they call dirty energy and adopt clean energy, renewable energy. Of course, hydro is clean, but asking us to do very radical things that would only keep us at the bottom of the food chain. So, for example, again, this is my opinion, they are done building their economies using dirty energy, right? They are forcing us in the name of trying to improve financing because we are poor, supposedly, right? And the things we want to develop and where we want to get to, we need their money to do. And so they use their money to then what? Force us to do things that we are not ready for, right? I really love what we're doing here with the discussions we're having on African startups and all that. And you guys are doing amazing stuff and I love them. But I just want to encourage us to have this perspective in mind that we are not exactly there for every solution they try to throw at us, which seems reasonable if you are in their context. For example, if you talk about here, most of the basic systems are there. Right now, it's all about efficiency. If you understand business operations, they're at a stage where they've hit it and they're just looking for ways to do things better, cut costs, improve revenues. I mean, at a high level, if you look at it, right? So some solutions are good, especially with these AIs. I love it. I mean, I'm in that space. I started from investment banking and investing in other areas, and then I'm back in tech, that dual education. But if you are not in this market or in these Western world or economies, I think some solutions we need to look at them again because it's like an adult or a child trying to do what the adult is doing when we don't even know how to walk yet. So let's keep going. But I guess the key point here, or my conclusion here, is that one of the biggest ways we can actually influence our people, right, even through tech, is policy in terms of how we are able as a youth, right, to influence government policy decisions so that basic things like education, like one of you talked about, I think the gentleman from second from the left, so one of you talked about education. either you or I'm from Uganda, right? Education is a big deal. The basics of education we need to even be
to output data. So what happens is that if we are training the tool with inaccurate data, biased data, then it's going to churn biased results. So that's one of the issues that we're seeing here. So if, let's say, an AI tool has been trained to, let's say, identify Black people's names and say that they are more or less likely to succeed in certain roles, immediately you submit that resume, that means that you are automatically being cut off because it's identified your name as coming from a particular region. We see issues where people's personal data without their consent are being used to train the AI. So that's why you might be talking about that pretty dress that you need to get, and then the next minute you open Instagram, there's that ad in there. Because there may be some way, somehow you consented to having your activities on social media platforms or activities on the net to be reviewed and scanned to create a user profile about you. So when you create a user profile, you're able to tell that Antoinette likes fashion, Antoinette likes to eat, Antoinette likes to hang out with friends. So then immediately you open some of these apps, they are just generating and churning this out to you. You may like that because then it's personalization, it's personalized your experience. But then the question is, was the right transparency sought? Was there accountability? Was there consent sought? So that's some of the potential risks with AI, where we are not accurately collecting user consent, where there's discrimination and bias, where there's discrimination and bias, there's inaccurate consent collection, and then generally where the tools are not being trained with integrity in mind. So recently, I think about a couple of days ago, I was reading about a 14-year-old boy who killed himself after there's this app, I don't want to mention the name, which has like an AI tool. The child was like actually had a relationship with this tool. And there were certain prompts or responses from the tool that led this person to take away their life. So this could be as a result of the AI tool not being trained with the right data sets to be able to scan integrity instance or negative instance and block generation of such bad output. So those are some of the issues that I think are worth highlighting.
Thank you. Beatrice, you served as chair of Nigeria, board of directors, and as former GC at Atlas Mara. So how do you think that financial institutions can leverage this innovative technology in order to enhance compliance with existing laws and regulations?
Yeah. So obviously the pace, we're all trying to grapple with the pace of innovation that's going on in the digitization generally, especially with AI. As problematic as it is, if used ethically, actually banks and financial institutions and fintech companies should and can embrace AI. There are so many ways you can deploy AI to help create more sustainable value. So for example, regulatory compliance is such a low process, right? You can train, this is one area where you can very ethically train the AI to help you just do a lot of the analysis and the churning of the data and compilation in a manner that you can submit to regulators. You know, gone will be the days when you had to hire many people just to focus on that regulatory compliance aspect. That's what happened. Data mining, obviously, as long as you feed the right data. So you can't just hand it off to AI to mine the data without having someone there with some overriding, power to be able to make sure that whatever data they mine and whatever they're churning out is the right. Because obviously AI just drags whatever they can find, whether it's true or false or whatever it is, right? So that's one area. But data mining is one key area where you can really reduce the unit cost of doing business. Another area clearly is in forecasting. This is the work of CFOs. Every day, different functions, your CEO, your board, your shareholders, different stakeholders are asking different aspects of reporting. Having AI do most of the legwork will really reduce the time, and then you can have your management team and your other employees focus on work that really requires some thinking and brain work. And then there's so many areas, but one other final area is in credit. right? And this is one area. We're already, because this is what we have automated data processing that's already happening in banks, where we're processing data, you're sitting down and then you get an email saying you can approve for a loan, and you go, I didn't ask for a loan. Well, we're already doing some of that, but AI can really be deployed to accelerate it and really help, in my view, banks refocus their time and refocus their resources on other areas that really require investments in terms of manpower.
Thank you. Venture, so I'd like to ask you, given your former role as general counsel at HSAC, so how much legal consideration do you think that you just discussed on technology, how do you sort of toe that line, right? Like, you want to impact corporate strategy and develop products and also consideration. How do you go about it, like, dealing with
Yeah, great question. I think one of the roles that you can also the legal team can play in that is seeing around corners for the business, right? So they may not have as much exposure. They may not have a privacy expert that can see. Okay, I understand how AI works. I understand how the technology works. Yes, there's so many cool things we can do as a business, but there are so many. I can tell you what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. Such and such regulation is probably going to come because it's going to mirror what already exists. And if we build our product in this way, we're exposing ourselves to a very challenging environment in 3 to 5 years' time. If we build our product in this way instead, or this business line in this way instead, we'll actually be ahead of our competitors. And there are ways of doing that doesn't need to impede or slow down the business. And sometimes there are ways where you can advise a business to tweak a product or a business line that doesn't affect the profitability of it, but actually buys risk. I like to say that's like buying risk management for free. And that only requires somebody to deeply understand the technology, the business, and the law. And I think that's where, as a lawyer, you bring the legal expertise. And so as long as you can understand the business and the product at some par with your contemporaries in the business, you'll be able to add tremendous value in seeing around corners. So I think that's very important from a corporate strategy perspective. Even us, as we thought about launching into new markets, there are whole regulatory systems to think about. There are also just policy environments, macroeconomic concerns that, at least at fintechs that are startups, they're not thinking at all about like what's going to happen to the dollar versus the naira or whatever. They're so focused on their day-to-day that you can also bring that perspective as well. So I think I think there's a lot of value that a lawyer can add in that context. But you have to come grounded from a place of I really understand the product business in order to actually make that happen.
So given the diverse regulatory environments across the continent, Africa, what strategies do you recommend for companies to effectively navigate these differences in terms of compliance? I'd like to start with you, Beatrice. You've operated, you mentioned Rwanda, Tanzania, South Africa, just name a few. So I'd like to know how to sort of deal with the different regulations across countries.
Absolutely. There's no substitute for being there before you even incorporate any business. You have to go and understand the landscape. Understanding the landscape, when I used to practice and I would represent clients, I have some clients in Houston, sometimes in other parts of the States, and they're coming up with their whole Africa strategy and whatever, and we're talking about this, and then I'll say, okay, when did you go there last? Never been there. Like, okay, then how do you develop that strategy if you haven't gone there to feel and touch the ground, feel and touch the people you're going to be dealing with? There's no substitute for that. So let's start with that. And then two, to the point you were just discussing with Venture, actually, I would say from day one, you're also figuring out the regulatory and legal landscape. Because some mundane things like where do we locate our headquarters, for example, that if you make a mistake in terms of where you locate it, you will pay for it, in a very fundamental way. Some people haven't probably not heard of it, but if you've invested in Africa and in certain parts of the continent, Zimbabwe comes to mind, there's something called trapped cash. Okay? You will bring the money in after investment, and then you're not going to be able to get it out. Like, make the mistake. Zimbabwe is a fantastic country with phenomenal, actually, one of the in terms of where we find our employer workforce really qualified and well skilled. But if you get money in there, you're not going to get it out. So that has to be part of the, so you have to understand all of these things before you can begin to fashion your strategy. The other thing that you have to think about is, what is your hedging strategy? This is a mistake that many investors, and I would count myself as one who's learned my lesson the hard way, which is why we're here having this conversation, where you need to figure out a hedging strategy. If you're going to be in many jurisdictions, there's, there's foreign currency translation losses, right? Because if you are a US, European, whichever non-African currency investor, you're reporting to your investors in the currency where they are, whether it's the dollar or the euro or the yen or whatever, then you're going to have to translate the naira, into dollar. Well, when you're reporting, especially the pace at which we're seeing depreciation in currencies, we're seeing sometimes macroeconomic environments just hit you from nowhere, and then your business isn't doing all that year. You think you've made money in naira terms, and then you convert it to dollars, and then your investors are going, why are you losing money? But the asset is growing, right? You say, well, this asset was worth 10 million naira, but today it's worth 50 million naira, we've grown. But 3 years ago, when we invested $1 million, now you're telling me I'm worth $600,000. Like, how does that work? So you need to figure out your hedging strategy. Those are some of the things that from the get-go, before you go there, and believe me, there's a lot Africa is open for business. There's a lot of money to be made, but it's not for the faint-hearted. You need to figure out what your strategy is before you go in there. Know the landscape, and very important, if you don't already have them, find an expert on the ground that can help you navigate.
And then, Chris, I'd like to ask you, what are factors that startups should consider when evaluating potential projects?
I think she covered it well. I mean, I think there's a lot to consider, obviously. I mean, there are going to be, even where is the parent company? I mean, a lot of people, should it be in the US, should it be in the UK, in order to enable investment easily into that parent company. Keep the money at the parent company until it actually needs to be deployed in Africa. For all the reasons mentioned, right? You turn that into a currency on the continent, it could depreciate in some period of time, you may not be able to get it out. And so a lot of just even financial management around how do I deploy capital, how do I set up my corporate structure in a way that makes it an attractive investment option. Everything from that to in the fintech space, you're going to have to engage with regulators a lot. Every country across the globe cares about how their money is used, how it's being moved, like what the consumer experience is for that money. That is like, sometimes I think fintechs especially get started and think about it, I'm a tech company, I do tech stuff. But you're actually, once you touch people's money, it's a whole different setup in terms of all the laws that are going to be applicable to you and how important it is not only to the regulator, but to the central bank. I mean, we're talking about monetary, like financial currency movements. And so I think just being very, very prepared to have the right team that can go and have those conversations with the regulator before you even get set up. Once you get your license, after you get your license, through the examination process, they're going to be like, as a CEO might think about a top 10 user, a regulator is a top 10. They have to be cared for and shared information with and all of that. So I think just to add a little bit to what you mentioned.
Yeah. Great, thanks for that. So just moving forward, what role do you believe that AI companies and professionals like yourself can play in advocating for more clear and effective regulatory frameworks in Africa?
Well, so I think just even echoing what they're saying, you are supposed to create or cultivate a relationship with these policymakers, with the government and the regulators. You don't need to go into the lay of the land only when it looks beneficial to you. You need to show yourself as someone who truly cares about the end user, the people, the government. And that, in showing that, you actually foster a relationship with the government and the people. easy to navigate in such regions. Maybe something that I would say an AI startup should do is, one, understand what these laws are. Secondly, understand where the laws are headed. Because like I told you initially, the laws have been created by the actual implementation. But in conversations, in my experience, having conversations with the regulators show where their mind is at. The law may have been implemented, but then they're seeing that there's increased risk because there are so many AI startups, there are so many hyperscalers coming to the region. So then they're navigating towards actual implementation. To leverage that, you can show good faith, as I would say, with these regulators. I noticed that some of these hyperscalers like Google, for example, has set up a research institution in Ghana where they're creating more awareness on AI initiatives, training the locals to leverage local content, local skill sets to be able to build their AI tools. That's a way to leverage or to have a conversation or have a say in that kind of conversation. Regulated sandboxes to allow these AI startups to leverage the skills and the resources that these scalers have to also develop their innovation and their ideas. That's a way for them to also have a conversation. And then thirdly, even self-regulating. So you don't necessarily have to wait for there to be a law to comply. As an AI company, as a data privacy company, or a company that's saying that you're privacy forward, you build on the trust of the people. What are the things that we need to implement? Ensure that people's data is safe, ensure that we provide transparency. Just do things that will not lose trust or the reputation in the eyes of users. And that's also another way that they can also leverage that's also not a similarity of the conversation.
Beatrice, I'd like to ask you, in your view, moving forward, what do you think that the future holds for financial institutions in Africa in regards to these regulatory changes that you talked about that are happening today, and innovations for governance? What sorts of specific policies do you think should implement to have a positive impact?
Well, I see some exciting things on the horizon, actually. Well, one, as many fintech, neobanks, banks that we have in Africa, there's room for a whole lot more, right? Because the underbanked population is still there and there's still a need. And so there are a few things I'm watching. When we meet here in a couple of years, don't say, Beatrice, you said that they happen. So open banking is one. Open banking is this idea that allows basically everyone, fintech, bank, whoever you are, to have access to customer information. Now, of course, you can make arguments for and against, but that will, in my mind, reshape the landscape once that is fully adopted across the continent. Two, I'm hoping the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, I think that's what it's called, which seeks to create a free trade zone among about roughly 34 countries. That would be, actually, open banking would be good news for fintech companies, possibly bad news for banks. So on the flip side, this free trade agreement might be bad news for fintech companies because it really opens up the payment ecosystem. So you see e-commerce will become a lot easier. We're already seeing an African DFI, like Afreximbank, already setting up a platform that would allow trading through that process. Tariffs will be waived. Afrexim is also extending funding to countries to help them absorb some of the shock from the tariffs that they're going to have to waive. This whole idea of different currencies through that platform, if that all works out, that would be an exciting development. I'm hoping that our regulators and banks and everybody will embrace, rather than throw away the baby with the bathwater when it comes to cryptocurrency. There's a whole hodgepodge of laws. Some of them are banned outrightly, some are nebulous as to whether they allow it or not. And regardless, I've some banned it and unbanned it, like Nigeria, and then decided they liked it and created their own currency. So I'm hoping to see more harmony in that space and more clarity and certainty around the regulation to to allow, because whether we like it or not, with all the bans and all the uncertainty, we still have about 9% penetration there. We have 9% of global, crypto, digital assets are being used in Africa. And it's only going to keep growing. So we have to find a way to address that. And then, of course, I would like to see more harmony on just the data privacy laws. That one is speaking around the legal policy changes I'd like to see. You will see that they're just so disparate. Some countries are very well developed, like Nigeria that we've mentioned, but Nigeria has 11 different regulations regulating data privacy. Thankfully, there's one in 2023 that was comprehensive, but that one didn't say the other 10 are no longer enforced. So you have to be figuring, am I going to be complying with all of them? Rwanda has 4, Mozambique has none, DRC just had it. So we just need more certainty around that, because that's what's going to allow people to know whether you can use AI to mine data. That's what's going to help. I mean, Meta was fined a whole bunch of money in Nigeria recently because they apparently breached data privacy laws, and I'm sure they had some very well-meaning lawyers advising them. But we just need more clarity to know what you can do and what you can't do. So yeah, that's what I'm watching, and I'm excited to see how that all shakes out.
I just wanted to add that yes, I'm excited to see a lot of transformation, because even as we even have the actor, there's the AU AI strategy policy, and we're seeing the data protection convention. So I think we're slowly getting there, identifying the policies, enacting them, and then now allowing them or creating teeth, like I say, for them to be able to actually bite. Because so far the regulations seem to have all, even similar to the EU AI Act, but the difference is the EU AI Act has some teeth. It's enforceable, whereas these are nice to have. Make sure to create, to consider AI ethical considerations when you're creating your AIs, but nothing like we're coming for you if you fail to comply. So we need to be more robust in that as well.
Great, thanks for that. And so before we open it up for Q&A, I'd like to ask you, I'm sure some of us here have great ideas and might want to go back to how to start a career. What is the first level of advice you give to somebody who wants to, what should they be thinking about as a potential?
I think you have to be there for a while and know the market very, very well.
We'll get started. We'll make sure that we're on track time. So this is the panel for building Africa's future cities. And our goal in this panel is, to highlight, some of the progress that has been made so far in, developing and investing in Africa's real estate landscape, and also dwelling into some of the unique challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. And so, Africa's urban centers are rapidly growing, and they're poised to also become very influential, players in the global development. And this panel, we want to highlight those opportunities as well. So we've gathered our fine panelists here who have experience in finance, technology, real estate development, and we hope to inspire some of the innovative strategies that will shape sustainable, vibrant cities across Africa and position the continent as a global player. So, with that, I will introduce our panel. I'll just give a short introduction and open it up to them to give us a brief background of their experience. So, Alele here, she is the founder of Igubutech Global. It's a climate finance fintech, pioneering green finance and sustainable infrastructure across Africa. With a background as the head treasurer of Barclays, she brings a valuable insight into the complexities of securing financing and emergence of new forms of green capital to support sustainable development. Junie, she is the partner at J. Francois and Associates, and she also leads Reality Group and specializes in complex real estate and technology solution transactions in emerging markets. And her experience and expertise is particularly relevant in the context of financial flows from the diaspora to Africa,
And a large chunk of this investment is directed towards real estate, right? And so her insights will shed light into the growing interest from the diaspora in Africa real estate and the impact of this influx of capital that has on the market and local communities. And Daniel, he is the co-founder of Sesto Global. It's an innovative real estate platform that streamlines the process of searching for, financing, and verifying property units, and it's known as the Zillow of Africa. A technology that transforms the real estate landscape, enabling more transactions and improving the transparency in the markets. And Daniel will shed some light into the vital role of technology that plays in reshaping real estate in Africa, and how platforms like Sesto are paving the way for more efficient and accessible markets. And Uche, he's the vice president of International Development and Finance at Simon Property Group, one of the largest owners and operators of real estate. And he has extensive experience, 20 years in diverse real estate investment, development, and asset management, which span across hospitality, retail, and multifamily properties. And so he's going to shed some light on some of the challenges that he's faced in investing and developing in Africa. He's also has an MBA from Columbia Business School, and years before he put together this panel similar to this. So this is a full circle moment for us. And last but not least, Fred is the senior VP of Toll Brothers, one of the largest multi-family apartment developers, land and community developers, and through his substantial domestic and international business experience in real estate, financing, and housing, he'll provide valuable perspectives on the challenges and opportunities in real estate development in Africa regarding attracting investments and ensuring access to affordable housing. And so with that, I will open the panel to shed some light about your journey and what motivated you to build, invest, work within real estate and across Africa as a whole. Yeah, whoever wants to go first.
Thank you. So, thank you for the very generous introduction, and to all of you who are joining us on Graveyard Shift. How I came to banking and real estate in particular was from the 2008-2009 financial crisis. I was graduating university at the time, and a lecturer came in one of our last days of the year to explain that Lehman had defaulted, and that subsequently crystallized into millions of people all around the world losing their homes. And I was just absolutely astounded that few failed trades could have such severe impact for so many people. Fast forward, my first role in the bank, as a result of the financial crisis, I joined Barclays, and Barclays had a global mandate because they'd been burned in Spain and Portugal, where they had borrowing arrangements that gave mortgages to people where the first installment of your mortgage would only be paid 5 years after you've taken out the mortgage and bought the property, because the idea was that property values will always rise. And when the bank got its fingers burned in real estate in the south of South Europe, the first decision they made was, we're pulling back from real estate worldwide. And we're sitting in Johannesburg thinking, well, we're in Africa, people need houses. we haven't been lending in this way. And that's the very beginning of my journey with real estate and commercial property and the financing thereof across the continent. It's started very contentiously, and really since that point it's been a career built around shining a spotlight on how African development challenges are different, and the financing response to those needs to be different and specifically tailored for our context.
So it's interesting you talked about the global financial crisis, because that's sort of like
where I am today, that I think is also the transition. You hear me now? Better? So the global financial crisis as well, for me, is sort of like what sort of led me to where I am today. I was, like everyone else, finance. At the time, I had done management consultant, got out of that, how to work with some interesting real estate deals, New York City Housing Authority, or hospitality deals. The global financial crisis happens, and it was just something that was missing. I just thought, I wanted to change. At the time, the government sort of, those countries were able to sort of come back and try to make an impact. I thought I wanted to do, I wanted to go to see that, right? I wanted to go and help people and help the continent, and someone helped me recognize that actually real estate is also a way of community development and impacting and shaping the environment. And so I decided to go the MBA route, but Africa. Specifically worked, took a role in hospitality investment fund as part of ARM, Asset Resource Management in Nigeria. That was where we were stationed, with the mandate of looking for opportunities to invest in hospitality across Africa. Fast forward, that led me to the hotel project that we did, 4 Points by Sheraton in Lagos. We can look it up, 4 Points by Sheraton. So I had the opportunity, I did that project from the ground up, 2.5 years, 13 pounds lighter, 6 kilos, whichever way you want to go, and a lot of experience. But that sort of, I realized that I wanted to focus on international aspect of real estate. And so from there I came to Colombia, and then fast forward, that's what we did today. Investments in real estate.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, so my route is more the little person's route. I actually started in real estate after law school. I just started looking at the trends here in the U.S. and particularly in New York, and saw how the market was shifting towards Brooklyn, where I lived at the time. And so I started buying properties in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy in particular. But also at the same time, my best friend is from Ghana. We went down the street to Columbia to undergrad together. And so after law school, I had gone to Ghana and fell in love with Ghana. Always felt my connection to Africa. I am Haitian American. So I always felt my roots were in Africa. I am Yoruba though. I am not from Ghana, but I have a love for Ghana. And so through the help of her father, I bought my first piece of land in 2008 in Ghana. And then we bought another set of land in 2010. And I started working and developing in Ghana, in the Caribbean, and in Florida. So I'm more of the little guy route.
Great. Hi everyone. So my background into real estate really started in tech. Background was more in the Web3 space. So I had an early Bitcoin exchange, was doing mining, and really got into this the idea of digitizing land registries and digitizing land records on the blockchain. And I moved to Ghana in 2015 to do a research project with the Ministry of Lands. And the idea was around how you could digitize land titles, and that would be utilized to make it easier to buy property, easier to get mortgages. But what you really see, what we saw when that happens, is that there's a gap, right, between getting a land title and getting a national property. You know, the land titles, I can tell you if the cement was quality, if it was built to spec, if it's off plans, it's going to finish. And so from there, we set up CESO, which we say is digitizing the land registry through the private sector and utilizing verified transactions to create a trusted platform for real estate.
Hi everybody, I'm Fred Cooper. My journey to being sitting here at 130th Street really hasn't taken me very far since I grew up right at 91st Street where my mom still lives, but it's been circuitous. My first experience in Africa was hitchhiking across North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, way back. Got me interested in emerging markets in general. When I came back from that trip, it was in 1980, interest rates were about 18%. New York City was becoming, the government itself was becoming the largest landlord in the city. It was taking back it owned about 100,000 units that landlords had basically dumped. A lot of them were occupied. I started out as a housing organizer and organizing rent strikes and things like that in Brooklyn, and did that for a few years. I wanted to learn finance, but chose to do it through Kennedy School of Government as opposed to business school. After that, I worked for New York City's Economic Development Bank for 5 years, then 4 years with another developer, and then got recruited to Toll Brothers, which is one of the largest home builders in the U.S. To be clear, Toll Brothers only builds in the U.S., so my interest in Africa really is through relationships I've developed over time. I'm working kind of as an advisor through the Stanford Seed program. I've mentored a number of developers. I've worked with, there's a company called Acorn in Kenya that's the largest student housing developer in East Africa. I host them. I've been back and forth with them a lot, and a couple of other developers in Africa, and just gotten very interested in that. Wharton has an international housing finance program where I've lectured. So a lot of different touch points, and so it's on a personal basis.
All right. So my next question is, there are rapidly developing projects across Africa, like Alera City, Echo Atlantic, Nigeria, Tatu City, Kenya, Senegal Smart City. So what are some of the specific examples for you in sustainable infrastructure projects that are currently transforming African cities, and where do you see the most growth and opportunities emerging from these types of projects across Africa? Yeah. Anyone can take this, or?
So what I would say is that there's a lot of more developments moving towards infrastructure, and we say like developers for developers. Like always, they say that building any project in Nigeria or throughout Africa, right, can really be an extreme sport. That a developer has to have many jobs. You have to potentially be into dredging. You have to be into land reclamation. You got to be into soil testing. So many things that would not be on the responsibility of a developer in America falls onto the developer in Africa. And so because of this, the amount of cost, the amount of expertise that you need makes it very difficult for large-scale projects to hit the market. So what we're seeing now, throughout the continent is developers kind of taking a step back, rather than saying we're going to build the housing, the infrastructure, and everything. They're saying why don't we do the roads, the pylons, build the lots, and create what we call service plots, right? So this is land that already has roads, that already has access to electricity, already has access to water. So a developer, all they need to do is come in, find their plot that's already been verified and tested, and we know that it can support the development that, the number of floors that we're looking for, and you can actually just start there. So I think that in the future, we're gonna see a lot more of these developers for developments for developers, right? So kind of a pre-step of building the infrastructure. And I just want to touch there that even in Lagos State, it's in Nigeria, it's a key strategy of the government. There's a department called the LSDPC, the Lagos State Department of Property Construction, I think. And what they actually do is that you see most of the major developments are actually joint ventures with the government. So the government will give up the land to the developer and take equity in the project so that they can offload the cost of infrastructure development to the private sector. So I think that's a massive, massive trend that we're seeing, and it can really help any investor buy into a place that already has the security and kind of initial investment put in.
I was going to say, you left out procurement, right? So developers also have to go to Spain and buy kitchen equipment, right? That you're involved in every single thing. You're buying power, you're buying generators, right? Like you literally have to be involved.
No, I was just going to chime in and say exactly to that point, maybe taking a step back to give it a little bit of context for those who have not yet been on the continent. Africa has an estimated $1.5 trillion infrastructure gap, right? And from a sustainable infra investment perspective right now, the fastest pipes and capital flows are into energy and the transport value chain, whether that's like building road or getting aviation and shipping infrastructure there so that we can drive more trade. Right, the Africa Free Trade Agreement has a massive intra-Africa mobilizing the billion people we have into the world's largest open and final open market. And a lot of the sustainable city projects that we're seeing is just really leveraging the opportunity that's been created by things like the Lobito Corridor, and we see this large transport investment, a large energy investment going. Contextualizing it a little bit more, when people talk about energy in Africa and large energy projects, there's large projects and small projects. If you think that we've got just over 1 billion people, there's 900 million people without consistent access to energy, right? The stat is 600 million, but when you count the number of people that have access to energy but don't use it because it's too expensive, that's 900 million people, including many women that are using still wood to prepare food at home. So the sustainable infra opportunity is across the value chain, and we see a lot of sustainable city developments that are attaching themselves to the large, maybe triple P type investments in energy and transport.
There's two types of challenges. One is where, as you described, you find a piece of land you've developed, you become a land developer, of a piece that may not have been developed before, but then there's still millions of people flooding into existing cities and, huge slum areas in urban, in the cities, and you need to figure out solutions for those as well, because obviously people, in a lot of cases, there's examples of people who could build a new city somewhere, even affordable housing, if it's too far out, people can't get back into their jobs, so they migrate back to the urban areas, and that's a different set of challenges, I would say, in terms of dealing with the really internal growth of the core of cities.
Let me also tell you specific challenges. I'm not going to name specifics. These are things I've been part of, but I don't want to name any names. But I think if you're talking about broad-based infrastructure, right? Obviously, this is like at a scale of government, right? A lot of the countries don't have all of the capital, so it is going to require public-private partnerships to get that done. Well, one of the, again, speaking from experience, we did a major toll project and sourced the financing, 30-year concession. Now, a new government comes in place. What do you think happens to that 30-year? Right? So, the ability to have those agreements respected and honored going forward, I think it is also a challenge, right?
Yeah, and I want to touch on that point as well, and also what Frederick's saying is that especially this type of for developers, of course, works in rebuilding the new city. There's New Cairo, a lot of cities, the Akon city that I was trying to do, didn't live up to it, but this concept of building a new city and moving people to it is good in some ends, but generally towards the higher end of the market, right? And so when we look at, a stat people always use is like what solutions can provide for people who live on $2 per day, right? And I'm sure maybe you've heard that aspect, but if you look at what type of house can someone afford who lives on $2 a day, there really is no house that, that can make up that cost. And so when we also look at cities in the future, we're gonna have to really think of any material science engineers here. We need definitely some brains thinking about new material types, right? So the houses of the future in Africa will not, in most emerging markets, are not going to be built out of cement, are not going to be built out of imported materials. So one thing we see several developers looking at is houses made out of laterite. Laterite is a material that's found in the ground all over the world, similar to adobe in Arizona, that you can mine out of the ground and build adobe houses. And so we also need to think of exactly what are the solutions for mass housing, because if people have to live so far away from where they work, there's many examples like this. There's people who know Nima and Accra, the whole area was that they built another city for the people to move them to. It was very central. And what did they find right afterwards? They all moved right back. And so if you have to think about, what can be built affordably and that can actually be scalable.
Okay, on that note of affordable housing, this question is to Fred. As cities across Africa continue to grow, the challenge of affordable housing has become increasingly urgent. And so many countries, high mortgage rates as well, and limited access to financing can hinder to meet the rising demand for housing. So, question to Fred, given these challenges, what are some innovative mortgage strategies or financial models that you've observed that could be adaptable to improve access to affordable housing across Africa?
Well, there's a lot of steps. I don't know necessarily that mortgages are the only solution. There's a whole, as you mentioned, land title is a big issue. How do you control construction costs? How do you provide dependability? Developers want dependability before they'll invest. How do you develop properties that are more energy efficient so the operating costs are lower? But there are, for example, we were talking about the urban areas. There are things like microloans that, where people can borrow to fix up their house. They can repay, they can borrow in small amounts. There are more case studies recently with, the IFC, International Finance Corp, the U.S. IDFC, International Development Finance Corp, where they've helped subsidize, provide sort of backstops for mortgage facilities in some of the West African mortgage institutions that have allowed them to basically tap into the global markets with investment grade ratings, because they have this credit support and build up a base of funds that they can then use to provide more reasonably priced mortgages. In Kenya is a country I know reasonably well. Government borrowing, I think right now is like 17% for a 10-year bond. That's very expensive, and that's the most risk-free rate. If you're trying to bring mortgage rates down, you kind of have to separate from that and get into the international credit markets. And so there's some examples more recently of those sorts of institutions being formed that have provided. You need more capital for mortgages. Obviously, if everybody has to pay cash for a house, you're limited in the number of buyers that can become homeowners. So if you can create mortgage credit facilities and then create ones that are actually some reasonable priced interest rates, you have a chance to really expand home ownership and also encourage developers who are more willing to build if they know they can exit a home that they built, someone's there to buy it from them, so they're not stuck with it. They can reflow the cash flow.
Yeah, and like you can speak to green financing.
Yes, our company, Ikuku Global, Ikuku means treasure. We play in the green and climate finance space, and I couldn't resist, Fred, you referenced Acorn as an African player that you referenced, that you worked with. Acorn is a student housing developer or affordable housing developer in Kenya, and they were actually the issuers of Kenya's first green bond. We believe that projects understanding their climate and sustainability exposure and being able to speak to that as they go to market is an unbelievable opportunity to unlock the lower cost of capital. And we've seen that insofar as the Acorn issuance in Kenya. Several projects in Nigeria have been beneficiaries of that, not least of which is Echo Atlantic. If you're familiar with Lagos, Echo Atlantic has the longest sea defense wall in West Africa. That's a project that was financed by Axis Bank. initially at around 17.5%, and through being able to relook at the same transaction through a sustainability and a climate lens, and in terms of its resilience value, that was a transaction that we were able to restructure into a green fund that dropped the cost of financing from 17.5% to 14.5%, and then further created an opportunity to flood in international capital as it was dual listed on the London Stock Exchange. So green and sustainable finance is one aspect that we see as a potential accelerator of flows of finance to the continent. But being in a room like this, we can't not reference the fact that already multiple African countries are experimenting with initiatives such as diaspora bonds in Kenya, in Cabo Verde.
They already do as far as any of this is concerned, and clearing space for them to do more of what they are already doing in this regard.
Thank you so much for that. Before opening up to questions, I just want to ask one more question, and that's AI. So how many of you guys use AI for your work, for school? Okay. So the interesting thing about AI and climate change is that we can use AI to help us in climate mitigation and adaptation issues, for instance, in early warning systems and predicting weather, to help tell farmers when to plant and disaster prediction. We can use it, but then at the same time, on the other hand, AI requires significant resource and energy, and it needs big databases, which is a big infrastructure part, and that on its own is impacting climate change. So my question is, how can we take advantage of AI, particularly in the context of Africa, in climate mitigation? Because for me, I feel like it's also coming from the global north, right? So how do we make sure that AI is not just reinforcing the existing narratives?
Yeah, carefully, probably the easiest way. What we do right now is we're kind of tiptoeing into it. So kind of a couple of things that we've been working on is, number one, we do a soil test at the point of installation. That is all digitized. It goes onto a customer portal. The customer then can see what the results of, is it deficient in nitrogen? What do they need to, grow a good, if it's a tomato, onion, whatever it might be. And then we also mix that in with e-learning. And so kind of AI in the background kind of helps make that recommendation, both in terms of what they should be doing on the farm and then kind of assigns them to a certain course. Secondly, we're in the process of acquiring a business. That business effectively is a SaaS business that provides kind of like CRM, inventory management, point of sales to agri-dealers all over Kenya. So it's kind of like their back-end kind of ERP. So we're going to be able to then query the database to understand where certain inputs are for our customers and make that recommendation to say, okay, you can go over here and access that. And then we'll be able to top up their loan through a cashless transaction. And so it's kind of just on very slowly figuring out how to likely push people in the right direction. Equally, on the other end of it, we're an asset financing business. And so right now we have a call center. We have a bunch of stuff that's automated in terms of SMS and stuff to remind people when to pay. But we're now starting to play with, do we integrate AI into our call center? We have tens of thousands, now hundreds of thousands of leads. A team, maybe 30, 40 people that are going through these, as well as people in our portfolios. So trying to figure out, can we outsource some of that via AI to kind of obviously help drive down some costs, but also make us a bit more efficient. But it's going to take some time. So not something that brag about that we're doing at scale right now, but something that we're eagerly looking into. What AI has been able to help us do, I can say, traditionally within the last year, is that we figured out that we apply for a lot of different funding, as I mentioned before. Blended capital stack, it's a lot of no's before we get a yes. And so we look at grants, RBFs, these early conversations, and we're able to dump all of these applications that we've done into our own database. And then we have a thing where we use a carve out of ChatGPT, and it helps us query specific grants that might be applicable to us. And then also fills out 85% of the application, and then we're able to then go and clean it up and then apply. So it also helps speed up things on the funding side. So again, recommendations for customers, operationally makes us a bit more efficient, and then also funding wise, so we don't but still carefully and has a long list.
Yeah, I don't think it could be overemphasized how much, as John's pointing out, document processing can be a real a significant opportunity from the AI standpoint. I'm looking forward to AI being integrated more into the underwriting process for financing. We've kind of delved into this conversation because the documentation aspect of it is so diverse in terms of the kind of information that we can get from people who are looking for financing. So I think that the AI will play a significant role in not just helping with that processing and underwriting process, but also in hopefully moving the people and the entities that are looking for capital into a space that's more standardized, where they kind of have an understanding of what does their entity or them themselves, what do they have to have in order to bring themselves forward to a financing opportunity to increase the likelihood that they actually will receive that money. So I'm hoping for a downstreaming element that AI will help. And maybe we get to the point where people are using AI to feed their information into some type of mechanism, and that mechanism will tell them, all right, you need to have this aspect beefed up, or you're missing this aspect before somebody's going to be interested in investing in you. And so you can begin to address those issues more quickly.
Thanks so much. Now we're going to open it up to questions. Two questions? Oh my God, okay.
Okay, hello. Yes, I've really appreciated this discussion. My name is Marlo El-Tayeb. I'm an MBA candidate at Yale School of Management, and I'm also a founder of a startup, Harness. We support renewable energy developers in West Africa to scale their operations through our AI-powered platform that connects them to investors. So my question is, specifically, we're starting out in Ghana, where we see growth of a 62 million SAM across West Africa and a potential valuation of 900 million by 2029. And so that's given the appropriate expansion strategy. So with the challenges of the VC space currently, how do you recommend early stage African startups to demonstrate this unicorn potential when we're starting the smaller market? And how can we maintain our mission and essence around impact for small local developers?
Yeah, I can try to do a couple of.
I was just going to do maybe one more so that we could answer it together.
Okay, great. So the Loss and Damage Fund has been critiqued given the number of contributions that are on the order of magnitude of millions in comparison to the billions of dollars that are required to solve the climate crisis. So going into COP29, how can we pressure the world's largest emitters to make meaningful and significant contributions to the fund in such a way that climate reparations drive meaningful change and, pardon my frankness, are not just a way for the global north to save face?
I'll take the first question. I think, with Sun Culture, I was literally in the same spot. Like, it was maybe 2 years after B school, and then jumped into it. And I think the things that we did well to get us to the next level was, one, we had our stuff together. So things like, literally like audited accounts go a long way with raise money. Making sure that just kind of dotting your I's and crossing your T's is big. I think secondly, look for soft funding too, especially in those early days. There's a lot of grant funding, woman entrepreneur as well. You can get, there's definitely funding out there for that. So I'd say maybe not go after your typical, I want to raise a massive, Series A and blow it out of the water, but really look out for some soft funding early on. For us, because we kind of hit a bunch of these kind of impact verticals, we were probably, before we did our proper Series A, we had already probably secured $6-7 million just through grants to get things rolling. So I really push you in that direction, number one. But again, falling back on make sure that you have your stuff together early. It's more of a pain in the butt to clean things up after things have really start rolling versus from the jump. Have an accountant, have proper HR. Make sure you have policies the procedures in place. Ghana also is like in the shadow of Nigeria, and so like I think it's sometimes it doesn't get the excitement in terms of some of that funding as maybe you see in Nigeria, but there are plenty of people there. I'm happy to connect with some folks that I know on the getting inside, the more on the agri side of things, but I'm sure they know some people in the network that can help out. I mean, it's going to take time. I mean, it's you have all these, what's the big one where they have all the wealthy folks go? They go and talk about climate, they show up in the private jets. It's like, I mean, it's going to take time, but I think like going back to what you were saying before, kind of diverse capital structure, like you're saying, not necessarily waiting for the North to come in and fund it, but things like carbon. There's a lot of bad that comes with carbon too. I caught you loud and clear on that. There's a lot of bad stuff that comes out of it, but also it's a very powerful tool as well. And so I think it really goes back to being creative, try to fill a bit of a gap and get the ball rolling before you see some of the larger funding come in. We had a discussion, this was last week, and it was like a huge climate fund, won't say the name, like billions of dollars are looking to put into climate. Africa wasn't even on the list of where they're going to invest. It was X'd off. We're like, how is this even possible? Yeah, the customers that we deal with, that we see, it's like our farmers are the ones that are getting hit the most by everything that's happening with climate change. So again, I don't have an answer, but more just a suggestion that we need to be creative. There are things out there right now that will a bit of a drop in the bucket, but we'll at least get the ball rolling in the right direction and keep pushing. The best thing we can do is be loud and make sure our voices are heard, and hopefully things will change.
Yeah. I just wanted to add to that because I'm also passionate about the loss and damage fund. So I believe in numbers. So it has manifested itself over the course of all these negotiations and all that, because it took some small island states to come together to start off the conversation on loss and damage. And up to this point, it has been decades because of the slow processes and all that, but it has come to you finally. So adding more communities, more countries into the bucket,
I'd like to move this to the beginning of our so that everyone can partake in this particular discussion. I know a few excited people about this. So, without further ado, and not to waste anyone's time, the people that are ready to leave. I'm going to introduce our panelists. Unfortunately, we have one of them drop out because of the timing change. But that, regardless, we're going to have a great conversation here. So, first of all, I would like to introduce Laulu Servanjo, also known as Laulu NYC, to many of you. Please a round of applause for Laulu. I will just read off the intros here, so bear with me. I'm sure he doesn't need much of an introduction. Many of you know his work. But Laulu is a renowned multidisciplinary artist. His distinctive Yoruba influenced art has been featured in collaboration with global icons. You see it everywhere, the likes of Beyonce, Serena Williams. His work bridges that traditional African artistry with contemporary global platforms. And that makes him a leading voice in African visual arts on the international stage. So Laulu, please welcome to the stage. Thank you. Unfortunately, Camilo is not able to join us today and sends his apologies. So I'll skip him for now, and then we'll have more information about him on the website later on. Next up, I'm going to introduce Achille Tenkia. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Or Ants for short. Yeah. So, Senior Program Assistant at Mellon Foundation. He works at the intersection of philanthropy and cultural preservation, which is exactly what Mellon focuses on. And they're one of our sponsors today as well, so please everyone put a huge round of applause for it involves initiatives that promote and preserve African cultural heritage, while also fostering innovation in our communities. And lastly, but not least, I'm going to introduce Tunde Ajaba, also known as Tunde. Tunde is an accomplished entertainment, media, and tech executive. He's a partner at Noah, and prior to this, he had extensive history and extensive experience in the global entertainment industry, previously serving as the head of African music strategy at Sony Music for African culture. And that's just a summary of it. I'm sure they'll be able to tell you a lot more about that, but please welcome to the stage Tunde. So, we have a conversation that has to be cut short because of time, but we'll try to make the most of it. So gentlemen, welcome. This is going to be a very fluid conversation. I know I've prepared questions and stuff, but trust me, we're not following the book because we're along there. So I'm going to start off with just general questions. I'm sure there's a lot that you guys want to know about these guys. There's a lot that you guys want to know about why we're talking about cultural fusion. And we can easily call this something else. Probably with other people. We've started with Afrobeats and stuff, but let's not go into that conversation right now. This is about Africa's culture. This is about the fusion of African culture with the rest of the world. You all know how Africa's culture is taking off. Now, all of a sudden, it's something that is mainstream. It wasn't the same thing maybe 15, 20 years ago. Depending on what time period you're looking at, it's had different parts of it highlighted. Now, I think it's safe to say we're at our bloom, right? And it's important to know how we hope to maintain that. And not just maintain that, but how it's affecting each of us in our different industries. And so I'm going to put this question out there for everyone on the panel, just in your own separate industry. As artists, as creators, how is this emerging trend of African culture being mainstream now affecting your own industry? How's it shaping it? I think we can start off with that.
I would maybe even just kind of push back thinking about the framing of that question. I personally, I don't like to think about trends when I'm thinking about like culture, art, and creativity, because when you focus on trends, you're reducing everything to a consumer moment. And moments aren't movements. And I think when we're thinking about what's happening right now in Africa, if we're talking about it actually becoming a global imprint, that implies permanence, right? It implies something that is beyond a trend. So when we're looking at the way that African artists are innovating today, it's not just like the surface level, right? I think they're fundamentally shifting a lot of the frameworks in terms of how our art is not only produced, but also kind of perceived at a global scale, right? In terms of like the ingenuity in music, I mean, Lalu's, visual arts. Sorry.
Yeah, it's yes, right now.
I just hold it.
Yes.
What I was saying is that like I try to push back against the framing of trends because the African culture isn't this consumable moment, right? It's something enduring. There's a legacy, there's history to it, and kind of focus on trends. I think it can become incredibly reductive, especially as we're thinking about how to sort of cement Africa's place within the global imprint. That means like we're really kind of baking it into the global consciousness, right? Trends aren't baked into the global consciousness, right? So I would maybe just take a step back and kind of thinking about this as trends. Also another thing too though, trends, I think trending, it focuses on novelty, which is like pretty capitalist, and again, it doesn't really kind of deal with the fact that like we've been doing this for a very long time. There's a legacy of traditions and culture here that can't be reduced to.
Thank you.
I'm just going to. Can you hear me?
Not yet.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Sorry about that.
Just to echo what he said, I think, like he said, it's not novelty. So when we talk about African genius, for example, it's always been around. And I think what's happening now is that they're getting credit for it. And it's quite interesting to see what is going on, because we had this discussion with you. It was like, it wasn't always cool to be African like 20 years ago. It wasn't always cool to be African like a couple of years ago. It's now, like, I remember my friend was talking about the African police dispatcher, and I thought it was funny but at the same time, I'm sure those kids find it funny. But we live in a generation, an age right now where just even have an African accent is cool. It wasn't always like that. A lot of people are aware of that. So I say this to say that I think we've been consuming African engineers, music, art from a long time ago. But right now, we just happen to live in an age where there's cameras in us, and thanks to the internet, it's easier to see. You can just literally go on YouTube, TikTok, They go on Instagram and see where it's actually coming from. There's no third party. There's no intermediary. Like straight to the source. Yeah, I think it's a good time to be alive.
That's very interesting. I think that runs it perfectly for 2 days.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of what Aaron said. I think growing up here in the States and witnessing what's happening on the continent, it was really interesting to see that time shift when it did. But it did happen once, like you mentioned earlier. It's not something that I see as a permanence, but more of like it happened in waves, right? So first wave happened before I was born in the 80s, from the 70s, 80s, and kind of felt as the first real entertainment or cultural export from Nigeria. It kind of took over and became like what Africa went early, right? So that first wave. Second wave would have been Two-Face, African Queen, right? That was the second wave. Third wave was the Wizkid, and now we're in the fourth wave with like Grandma, Ashake, Burma. And I'm always speaking about West Africa. I know there's a whole bunch of them here in my country. I wouldn't want to say, oh, it's First wave could have been Mary Makeba, Hugh Masekela, first wave. Second wave could have been Kenna from Ethiopia, Sudan. Yes, so boom. Third wave would have been Mareba. Fali's still coming, right? Fali's coming. Come on. And the fourth wave would now be. Someone can set a real life by No, but it's been nice to see the waves happen and global recognition come with it, because I think that it's nice to be known for jollof rice, but I think when we have a cultural export that can be seen not just on WhatsApp, and you can see it on Netflix and Amazon, and you can see it on, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. It's just nice to see a consistency in the one waking up. So that's really good for the whole time.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I think you all touched on one thing that's a common theme here, which is we're out there now, right? We're getting credit for our culture, which is sad to say in a sense because it's our culture. It's always been it's just not good. I guess the main question that people have asked when it comes to culture in Africa making a wave over here, making a wave in the rest of the world is where is the benefit to the Africans? Economic impact, if you can call it that, right? And there are two questions that I have that can actually pinpoint of that. The cultural assets belong to the continents, but how does that contribute to the local economy? And how can we ensure that the benefits of this cultural exchange, if you can call it that, flow back to the continent? And that's different for different departments, different verticals, that's different in the art world, it's different in music. I mean, in Nigeria, for example, where I'm from, we've heard of one in particular for the music industry. And I think that's about it. Everyone was holding on to Maven as that example. So where does that leave us? And how do we maintain this? What is not a trend according to that? This is something that is an imprint, right? Because I think we all know to an extent, like there were trends that were there before. I mean, that were even their cultures that were around the world. I mean, I would say something like reggae now, for example. Not reggae. Don't cancel me, please. I mean, to an extent, there were different parts. There were different types of genres that were more popular than others in the past, right? And those genres right now, they're in terms of popularity, they're limited. How do we ensure that this is not the case for most of the things that are popping right now?
That's a really All right. No, that's a really good question, and I like to think about it like with the metaphor of the stage, right? So, agnostic of discipline, whether it's film, music, whatever, Africans aren't actually the ones creating the stage, right? Like the stage, they're being invited onto the stage, right? So if you actually think of who's like shaping the infrastructure around how arts, culture, etc. is produced and exported, it's not Africans, right? Like Tyler might have this hit, but you know, she's not like there's again that whole work of like stage making, of deciding who gets to be on, and deciding what gets funded, how it gets funded, for how long. We need more Africans in those positions, right? Because that's how you ensure that the people on the ground are actually, you know, benefiting and reaping, you know, the value of our creative genius, right? It's also how you kind of create institutions. It's like we need cultural institutions just as much as we need viable economic social institutions, right? So I think it's, again, going back to the metaphor of the stage, it's because we aren't the ones creating the stage. We're being invited on, it's great, you know, we're getting more invites now, even +1s, cool. Like, we can build our own stages, and I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I agree with what you just said. I think structure is very important. I'm starting to see a trend now where a lot of, like when you think about artists and you think about what's popular in the world, you see a lot of artists, when they get noticed, they eventually sign deals with, you know, institutions here. And when you think about it, whatever they're making doesn't really go back to the continent. The structure is here. And unfortunately, the way the world still works, the value is still retained in the West. So a lot of people are still looking for validation here, looking for validation, you know. So I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage. I think we kind of we already like burst through, but now it's more like, now that we're here, how do we like stay here? And I think in the art community, for example, I've been thinking about, like, every time I go to a museum and I see a lot of arts, I don't know if you guys see a lot of arts from the continent, and you see, like, you see the Pinot mask, you see the Ife head, and they have all these very weird descriptions sometimes. I just always think to myself, I'm like, the story here is not complete. But you know why the story will be complete? It was back, you know, in Lagos, or is in Ibadan, or in Osun State, where it actually belongs. So, I mean, these guys have had these pieces for so long. There's nothing stopping them from actually returning them back to where they are from. You know, and building museums back home. Because the truth is, you know, a lot of times the West is learning more about us than we're learning about us. I think it's time when we want to start the structures. They've earned so much from it, so I think it's only fair to build, you know, on the continent. We're not asking for too much, and also put them there, because the truth is, when you travel to Europe and you want to learn about Italy, you go to the cathedrals. You want to learn about Paris, you go to the, you know, Louvre, and you learn about, you know, you want to learn about Nigeria, you want to learn about Yoruba people, you should go to the museums too, you know. So we need to start thinking that way, and I've been advocating for it, but it just looks like we're begging, you know. They're not ready yet, but I feel like whatever is ours should be ours, and I think, I mean, the world shouldn't pay lip service to it. I think we should all join in the cause and, like, you know, just keep talking about it and spreading the word, like on stages like this and whatever before. So that's my take on it.
Well said. I agree. I think a lot of us that are in some of these rooms that we mentioned earlier are fighting the fight where we can. But infrastructure remains the main opportunity for people on continent from that vantage point, because no matter what room I'm in, I'm always stressing the creators, like, make sure you own your IP as much as you can, make sure you have a great lawyer, make sure you have a great team around you, make sure you don't have homeboy management. And you're laughing, but homeboy management is usually the reason why that artist that you loved 2 summers ago, you're not hearing from him right now. That money management is usually, you know, part of that as well. So business manager, lawyer, all that stuff. But even if your own team is right as a creator, sometimes the infrastructure is still not there. So, you know, I'm not the only person that stresses this, but some artists, some creators, I'm not saying artists, some creatives like to just like rush and do whatever it is they want to create. But then because of the lack of infrastructure, a bigger opportunity that would have been if they had all their, you know, their stuff in order, missing them and goes to someone that's less talented, you know, less creative, but they have, you know, better infrastructure, really, as an individual. And then as a culture, I think the unfortunate stereotype that a lot of Africans tend to have is we don't have a maintenance culture. So let's say someone builds something amazing, right? The problem is not us creating it, because we're African, we create amazing things. But the problem is once we create it, we don't maintain it. And so you'll have a bunch of great idea people that will create something, and then they won't train the people that are gone to like keep it going and improve it and evolve it and train the next generation to want to improve on it and evolve it. And we can apply this to any industry we want, even when it comes to education and history, like you just talked about the Ben Brothers. There should be a consortium of people on the continent trying to get that stuff back. There are. I believe that there are, but there should be a lot more people now. And we've seen examples of this a lot more. So my hope is that those that are involved with the culture at the extent that I know they should be, I hope that there is more attention paid to making sure that the infrastructures are in place so that not just our generation, but the generation after us has to move forward to.
Okay, I think that's probably a great point to segue this a bit. I know you mentioned the point about museums, about art going back to where it belongs. I know Anthea, you
Ashil, everyone's gonna call me A, man. It's Ashil or Ashil, just to.
Oh, so okay.
No, it's like where Ant come from?
I just called you. I don't call you Ashil.
Oh, sorry.
I call for the emails.
Oh yeah, okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Okay, so you work at Mellon Foundation, and Mellon has done a lot in terms of trying to restore cultural, I guess, some heritage back to where it belongs, right? And on that note, unfortunately, we had one of our keynotes canceled on us because of what was going back home. You're going to hear from him later, the governor of Edo State. You've worked in his state right now. You've recently put in some money into MOA, for those who don't know, that's the Museum of West African Arts. And I'm sure you can talk more about that. I'm going to let you just briefly talk about that, what that investment does for the topic of that particular conversation.
No, for sure. That's an excellent segue about the bronzes and MOA. So MOA is an African art museum in Benin City, and we gave them a $5 million grant. It's going to be supporting some of their organizational capacity, their exhibitions, because one thing we're actually finding on the continent as well, a lot of the talent leave, right? Because if you're a curator, an artist, whatever, like you can't necessarily get the best salaries and like Lagos, Accra, what have you, and we're really trying to invest in kind of just really building it up from an organizational capacity standpoint, making sure that the people that are working in these industries actually have livable wages. And so what you're saying about preservation, right? Like when the Benin bronze movement kind of took off, there was this huge debate about, will they survive in African museums because they don't have the AC? Like again, that argument's always. But I mean, it's
valid question.
No, you get those sorts of questions, and I think one thing that's really cool about MOA is that they actually are really working with the community, right? And to what you're saying, just sort of like that maintenance culture, like teaching people like even the bronze techniques, like that's part of the grant as well. Just making sure that those skills, those artisans, those artisanal practices are being carried out through the next generation. And I think that's kind of the role that philanthropy in general is playing. So Mellon, we're the largest funder of the arts in America, we're the largest funder of the arts in the world, and we spend around like $600 million every year on just arts funding. A lot of that goes to like the Met, MoMA, Smithsonian, this gallery here and there, but now we're really trying to think more expansively, right, about where impact can happen. So like $5 million in Nigeria, that can do like 50x what it could do here in New York City, right? So just in terms of like scale, in terms of ensuring that, we're really kind of like providing people the resources to preserve these institutions. It's possible. It's important because we can't depend on our government, unfortunately, right? Even though that should be something the Nigerian government is involved and invested in, but again, we know we are economists to deal with.
I mean, Governor Lasky would disagree. But it's not what you're saying. Historically, that hasn't been the case. I think since I've given you a specific question, I'll probably move to Tunde and Lauri. We've talked a lot about culture being exposed out of the continent. Now, when there's a cultural fusion, as we name this particular panel, right, there's a risk of losing that, of losing your authenticity, right? And I guess the question here is, how do you avoid that risk, and how do you make sure that adaptation does not occur harmfully?
Okay. I think the first way is the approach. How do you actually see yourself, and how do you see your culture? For me, I've always thought about culture as a medium. I've always thought about art as a language. And a lot of the art, for example, I do a lot of Yoruba art, what I use, Yoruba art itself, it's a language, it's like hieroglyphs, it's symbols, it's patterns, it's waves, it's a bunch of things. But then the idea is to be able to see the world through the lens of a Yoruba person. So if I was going to talk about a story today, something I just brought today, for example, about Kamala Harris, I'm going to do it in such a way as to reflect the views of a Yoruba person observing what is happening. So in that way, I'm able to capture what's contemporary with the lens of a Yoruba person. So what I do pretty much is to take that story, whatever story we're talking about, to like code it in such a way that when a Yoruba person sees it, or African sees it, or Yoruba Nigerian sees it, like, oh, what is being said here, or this is very familiar, this is something I can relate to. In that way, we are still on the stage, we're talking about whatever it is we're talking about, and we are not losing our language or authenticity. It's just to show what it means to be human, complex, just who we are. We just existing. When you're seeing my viewpoint now, the problem we had before is that we always had to translate everything to English. But with art, you don't have to. Music, you don't have to. You'll dance, don't we? Exactly. We can feel it, we understand it, even though we might not really understand everything that's been told us. That's why a lot of, I don't know if anybody heard about the debate that Things Fall Apart being adapted into Idris Elba. There's a lot of conversation around that. I found it very interesting. Nigerians like, no, he will not understand the culture. Blah, blah, blah. Right there. But the truth is, the novel is in English. If Chinua Achebe wanted it to just be for Nigerians, he probably would have done, wrote the way he did. The book is actually for the world. I met people all over the world, and wherever I go, when I say I'm Nigerian, like, oh, I've read Things Fall Apart. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay? So it's a starting point for a lot of us in the entry to the arts, is that people already know who we are. But then we need to build on that. And all building on that is just showing who we are as a people and not losing who we are at the core of what it is that makes us Yoruba, what makes me Igbo, what makes me Hausa, what makes me, the core person that I am. And I think it's very important. And I bring that to whatever collab I'm doing. I've done collaborations with a lot of Starbucks, Belvedere, Bulgari. When I go there, I tell them, okay, I want to do Bulgari. I was like, oh, let's do a scent, Man in Black. I was like, oh, what do I look like? Man in Black, Bishongo. And they're like, huh? What's that? Cool. Bring up a slide, explain what it means to them. And they're like, oh, wow, we love this. So, I'm going to talk about their brand and also infuse my culture. Win-win. Thank you.
Malu and I are quite close. I was out of my respect for the work that he does. And I would say that a lot of the work that I do is similar to Malu in the way that I tend to use my culture to educate those around me about African culture as I know it and Yoruba culture as I was raised in it. So when he was talking about, he tries to create art through the lens of Yoruba person. He's talking about Iwa, which is in our culture we believe in a set of rules and ways of life that our character is defined by, which we call Iwa. And as someone that walks that path, the term that we call ourselves are Oluwabi. We are literally people that are walking that way. So I think that the way he does it is I'm in a room with a brand, or working with an artist, or I'm tasked with, working with a company and building something out. I'm always keeping that in the background. I'm like, what would my ancestors say if they were here and had the opportunity to witness me? Right? Because most people I'm sitting in the room that don't understand most of them, I'm trying to teach them. But I'm also the king of Canada, so if I have to pull a slide up and if I'm having a conversation and they ask me who's Queen Nadia, you know what I'm saying? I might have to pull up that. So a very perfect example, when I was at Spotify, when we were doing the Afro, if left to the powers that be, you would look like National Geographic. And I went to Nigeria, I went to Nairobi, I went to South Africa, I went to different places so I could meet the people, see the culture firsthand, and see what things I can grasp from the cultures that can be represented on the platform. I don't want to just be a Nigerian thing, and I think that's what a lot of people that end up in certain roles that are tasked with certain tasks like that, they tend to just see it from their lens. Like if they're from East Africa, boom, it's Habesha everywhere. If they're from West Africa, boom, it's jollof rice. South Africa, you know what I'm saying? So I had to make sure that I, was pulling from all the resources. And if I didn't have the resource, I could find a friend that had a resource, right? So I think it's very important that, and for those in the room that are going to end up in positions where they have the opportunity to educate people that are now in their culture about their culture, like, don't let them go. Because you may be the only exposure they have to their culture, and you may not think it's that big of a deal, but when they start calling Jello, it's your fault. So if anybody asks me about Jello fries, I'm like, who in this room told me Jello fries?
I'm going to cut you there because I don't want conversations about Jello before we start to civil war. It's even puffy now. There's nothing wrong with Jello, by the way.
Unless, never mind.
We did serve everyone food.
Don't tell them where it's from.
We didn't tell people don't name rules, but we got the feedback. I know the answers, so that's what I said.
It's very sweet.
Okay. I would love to ask more questions, but I think we're very short on time. So I will leave the questions. I feel a lot of fun questions out there, so I'm going to open it up to the crowd. So if you guys have any questions for our panel here, please throw it at them. Question? All right.
Quick reminder for everybody, please introduce yourself before asking your question. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jai. So I have a question in terms of how you leverage art in a content that's very multifaceted and diverse. Because I know we talked about a lot of Anglophone spaces on this panel, but we're a continent of hundreds of languages. I myself come from a Francophone country, which has a lot of historical, musical influence. If we're thinking of people like Salif Keita, various things like that. So I guess, how do we leverage art in a space that I think it's very easy to put the Anglophone world, like Africa, on a platform because it is more palatable, but how are we allowing for opportunities for more exposure to that type of thing?
Yeah, I'm so glad because I'm also Francophone, Cameroon over here. And yeah, that's the thing. I mean, back to what Tunde is saying, I think sometimes the issue with a lot of people who have these seats is that they can only view the work from the prism of their own experience, and they don't recognize that, oh, y'all can't hear me? Let me just hold this because I'm.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Yes.
I was saying that the issues with a lot of people who end up occupying these positions, are only able to view things from the prism of their own lived experiences, right? And sometimes when that lived experience becomes externalized, it becomes the default. And I think the issue is that a lot of us don't recognize that there are multiple epicenters of cultural production on the African continent, right? So some of you, maybe Farah was your godfather, but a lot of us was Alimba, right? It's much more kaleidoscopic than I think it's often presented, but I think it's often never put yourself there and say, I am the African voice. No, I'm Cameroonian. I'm even Cameroonian. There's so many layers to that, right? And just always kind of prefacing and clarifying when you're stating things. I'm not going to come here and say I speak on the behalf, but I can also speak from Ashil, this Cameroonian that grew up in a certain specific context, and that I think also to what you're saying, right? The responsibility that we bear people that, may have never met an African whatever, we also have to exercise that productively and make sure that we're contextualizing the things that we're saying, right? I am Cameroonian before I meet Matthew. You said saying, just nuance it a bit. I think that can kind of push things forward.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think, we're at the beginning, and just put it that way, and there's so much on the continent to take from. Every time I talk, I say Yoruba, and I say that very intentionally. Yoruba people are about 76 million people in the world, and that is not a small number. And I'm talking in Africa, West Africa, not just Nigeria. You have Yoruba people in Benin, you have Brazil, you have Togo, you have Cameroon, you have where else? It's scattered all over the world. And I say this here, in Nigeria we have like 500 languages, just Nigeria alone, over 500. And when you think about that, that is like insane number. I think the other country next to that is China, that has that much. Nigeria has over 200 million people. So it's like a lot of people when you think about it. That's like close to the population of the US, you know? But they're just scattered. So it's like we are so varied in terms of like cultural identity that I probably might have something more in common with the Japanese than somebody from Kenya. We're that different. So it's very, very easy to like just, you know, like you said, perception. Sometimes everybody's just talking from their own lived experience. It's easy for people to just paint the brush of everybody being black, but we're still the most varied group of people on the planet, the continent. It's so diverse. Like somebody from Somalia, you know, Kenya, from South Africans don't look anything like West Africans. But to somebody who is not on the continent will be like, oh, they're black. You know, but we know that it's our job, like you said, to be very, very direct and also very intentional how we're talking about it. Nobody is a representative of the continent. You cannot be. It's impossible. You're not even representative of your own state. Your own country. When I mean country, state, like state is your house. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's impossible. So we come from like it's insane. But when we try to tell people out here who are like, how is it possible to have so much value? Yes, it is. In Nigeria, like, you literally could go from one street to the other street down the road, it's a different people, and then you go again to a different place, and it's always a different language, you know, and they're different, and they've been there for thousands of years, you know. So it's very complex, but we're doing everything we can, and I think as Africans, like you said, you Anglophone, you Francophone, I think that's in secondary because those are languages of the colonials, by the way, and it's just something we had to, I mean, they've forced us past 100 years, so pretty much is what we are right now. But under that, there's layers of, you know, identity. Even as a Yoruba person, to interest you that I'm Ijebu, what are you? Oyo. They're different Yoruba. So even in Yoruba, you have like subsets.
Completely different.
And totally different language, by the way. But then we have a general language as Yoruba, but then I speak Ijebu, and Oyo is different from Ijebu. You have Ilori, you have Ijesha, you have Igbo, you have Igbo, you have Ilori, you have Yoruba.
Yeah, I worry.
Exactly. So, and I hear my parents talk, they argue among themselves and they clown each other, and they're from the same person. I'm like, wow.
No? Thank you. So, next question, I saw a hand over there. One hand. I think that one is on. Should we take another question in the meantime? Do you have someone here for the question?
Oh, okay. Can the panelists hear me?
Yeah, we have it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Eno. So I just had a question about, you know, today you mentioned the waves of Afrobeat. And I just noted you didn't mention any women artists. So I just wanted to see build dominated. Is there anything or should anything be done to get more women artists, women musicians? And before people say, oh, we have to have salvation, then besides those three, or kind of a few others, but it's sort of a handful. So what are we doing, if anything, that should be done to get more representation? Have a woman on the panel.
I'm trusting you. We did try to get over there on time. We did that. This is not on us. Can we do the questions together? Can we have one more question before we answer? So, can we have a mic down here?
And I'm so glad you asked that. I know I responded based on the popularity of the artist. Yvonne Chaka, great. but she wasn't shooting up either. So you know what I'm saying? Like, I said Mary McKay, but I run this thing. I told you. The reality of the matter is, a lot of artists throughout the path or journey of Afro music as a collective, a lot of the male artists were the ones that were promoted more. I wasn't alive back then, I can't tell you why they made that decision. But it is great to see artists like, I mean, you mentioned T.Y. did. Irish Star is amazing. Simi's great. Tyler's a newcomer, but she's also doing great on piano. I mean, Yemi Allen's been killing her entire career. There's so many women. Angela Kidjo has been killing it forever. You know what I'm saying? There's so many women artists that don't get their just due. A lot of the work that we all do here highlights women as much as we do men for sure, day to day. So it's not really something that I always remember to acknowledge because it's something that I just do. But for the sake of time, I think we should mention the artists that are the most popular. But thank you for calling me out.
Hi. Hi, I'm Destiny. I'm a School of Professional Studies. Thank y'all so much. And I just want to ask, as creatives, what advice do you have for those balancing their artistic aspirations with their family's expectations? So, in order for Africans to continue to make a global impact, like y'all mentioned, you know, you want more creatives in art, but it's more of an unknown path than becoming a doctor, lawyer, etc. So, what advice do you have?
I like my parents. I told them I went to school for computers and then I was making beats on the computer. Like, I figured it out.
I mean, I think it's also, one thing is, like, immigrant kids that I come to find out my experience, the only way to actually become the people that our parents want us to be is by actually defying them. So for context, before I started at Mellon, I was on my way to Stanford Law School, and I lied to my parents and said, oh, I deferred. Lie to your parents. And a year later, I'm doing going to work, like, okay, that's something similar to what I do, but like, you know, a lot of your dream is to be in touch with people who like, you know, nurture and love you most, and I think it's taking that responsibility that you're kind of, you know, keeping that door open for other people. Right? Whenever anyone wants to come to me and chat about with me, I'm like, oh, let's chat about it, because there are not enough Africans here. Like, literally, I can count on my fingers that Mellon, Ford, a lot of like the big art smudgers, like there are very, very few of us in these positions, so just making sure that even as you kind of like get your own, you know, bag, like keep that door open for others who kind of got to as well.
Yeah, very important. I think there's no real balance. I went to law school, became an attorney,
and then you
practiced law for a few years, and then I quit. And
because you lied to your parents.
Yeah, of course. But the truth is, when I quit, I didn't tell them what I was going to do. There was like a whole intervention of like, oh, there's a problem, it's happening, crisis and stuff. So a lot of people are going to think a lot of things, you know, but you know who you are to yourself. So at the end of the day, you have to choose yourself. And being true to yourself sometimes might look like rebellion, but it is what it is. You know your struggles, you know who you are, and you know what keeps you up at night at the end of the day. You know, so it's just being true to who you are. Again, I'll never tell anybody, good job, follow it. No, you know, that decision is not for anybody to tell you. You shouldn't watch anybody, you shouldn't watch anybody's TED Talk to tell you that. You should just know. It's something you know deep down. If you're not that convinced, maybe you shouldn't do it.
The only thing stopping me from living out your dreams are your parents. The biggest parents lie to your parents. I was school for computers. They did not know that I was making beats. I moved out to LA, didn't tell them. Got a job at Apple off a whim because I lied to my parents. And when that check came, they did not care. They didn't care. Sure. I think you just gotta win. If you're gonna lie, you gotta make sure you win. She's like, oh, yeah. You can't lie and fail.
I think that's a general thing. Even I speak with business school students here, you know, whose parents to the extent don't know what business school is about. They think we're learning here. Yeah, I mean, like, we're networking. I don't want to say too much about what networking is, but So, Mary, we'll take one more question. I think there's more.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lily Yusuf, Compass, New York. Thank you so much. I cannot be living life without art. So I think it's our responsibility as diaspora living in America or Europe and the next generation. And I think for you students, if you go into banking and blah, 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 making money, to really have that fund for building the museums. And for people like us who are real estate developers, we come in to the bankers to help us get the money, build the museum, and have the artists there, because it's really up to us to do that. We cannot rely on the government, or maybe in the 10 to 20 years now going into that 1% African families and asking a fund to keep that and teaching in schools, and really also, I'm Somali and Kenyan, and the Yoruba, the Asante, the Fulani dances, that's part of our history. I don't want to have a museum with a hip hop, and it's not part of the culture that I grew up in, but also a real estate developer, and you are going to be one of those percenters Africans who are buying the penthouses in Accra, Nairobi. But you need to have the art in the wall. Who are you going to go to? And art will come to sell that. So this is what we do in New York every day here. And there are families, since the beginning of their business, they've always set 10% or 1% money to put into the art, because art is collection. The biggest collectors of art are Esther Logan great-grandchildren, it's like they're living out of that art. So I think it's our responsibility. So I would love to have the artists help us, to put that into the young generation, but it's up to us. Period.
Thank you. That's a question more I get your name, sorry.
Leila.
From Leila, yeah, so please, on that note, we're going to close the questions, and thank you all for your amazing time here this time. We could open it longer if we have more time, unfortunately we don't. I know a lot of people ask me about the art and learn what you do every day, basically again. But we can ask him separately when we get to that. As we're there, I think we're going to call this end to this particular panel. Thank you guys so much.
What an amazing panel that was, right? I think it's so exciting that just before you announce the raffle, you get to hear something creative, cultural. So thank you so much, fathers, for that insightful conversation on the creative industry. Now, yesterday it was announced that we are going to be giving away a TV show today. Someone in this room, I did like that. I am Virgil, the CEO of Global TV, and we are looking forward to giving away a TV show. We're going to give you production, studio, and distribution of this TV show. So yes, I'm going to call up Remy to kind of help me out with the raffle selection.
Hey, Martha.
And we're going to come up, Remy. So you guys put down your names and your ideas on here in this box. We're going to put out 3 names, and if I call your name, please run to the stage. Alright? And then we're going to have you as the audience decide the best idea. Alright? Alright, check it out, Remy. Can I get a drum roll? Hey! First up, and if I call your name, please run to the stage. Arnold So, Arnold's idea is a TV show which is trying different African foods. The next time Not yet, okay. So we're gonna give that away. And I got a drum roll, please. Xavier Ibrahim. Xavier's idea is African diaspora version of Insecure. Alright, we waste no time, so I'm gonna call the last one now. The last one is Ademola Ade Wuli. Is it here? Alright, please come down, please come down. And the idea is showcasing amazing, innovative take and creative talents and getting to know about their Is Ade here? Ade, please come down to the stage. He's coming down. Alright, so idea number one, we have Almond over here. Trying African trying different African foods. We have Xavier with the African diaspora version of Insecure. Right there. Alright, showcasing amazing, innovative take and creative talents and getting to know about
Just about them generally, what they're building and how they think about Africa generally.
Alright, so we've heard all the ideas. And all we have to do is give a round of applause, cheers, and whoever gets the high with the biggest cheers is going to take this one forward. Alright. Yeah, we'll just Alright, so first person, Arnold, everyone who thinks trying out different African foods should take. Everyone who thinks African diaspora's version of Insecure was showcasing amazing, innovative take and creative talents, and they get it.
again for the raffle exciting moment. So please, having a question, we have Malachi who lost his bag. In the back is the also documents inside the bag. People have saw the bag. Hello everyone, thank you for attention please. All of our attendees, the person with me on the next one, obviously has lost the bag with something very important inside. There's a notebook in the bag, written on it in the black. So if you see the notebook somewhere, it is bag, it is notebook, please give it to him. He's looking for it since the morning. Thank you. And then, as I mentioned earlier on the panel, we had a keynote before today from the governor of the state, Governor Gaseki, who landed here in the US, and unfortunately because of several issues we hear about, had to leave. So this is just a minute or two of a video for this, basically apologizing, telling you guys why he couldn't be here. Sorry.
Hello everyone. I regret that I cannot join you at the Columbia Africa Business Conference this year due to the unfortunate incident of severe flooding affecting many communities in my state, Edo State. Lives have been impacted and many families have been displaced. This year's theme, Navigating Disruptions, Strategies for Africa's Resilience and Transformation, resonates deeply with me because resilience is not just an ideal, it has to be a daily commitment. We are facing environmental challenges, but through innovation and determination, we will overcome them. Although I'm not physically present with you, I'm inspired by the important work you are doing. The solutions and connections you forge will help pave the way for a stronger and more resilient Africa. I look forward to hearing the insights which you share and to work with you in our collective efforts towards building a more prosperous future. I thank the Africa Business Club of Columbia University for hosting this vital conversation, and I wish you all a successful conference.
With that said, we're coming to the close of our conference, and we're going to close it out right now with our closing keynote, who some of you might have heard earlier today. I'm going to let our moderator do the introduction. Okay, here it is. Here we are, sorry. So please give a round of applause for Omose Iguodala.
Where's Angie? Hey! There we go. Are we staying here? Okay.
Yeah.
So as Courtney said, we have our very special keynote speaker tonight. He goes by the name of, or his name is Mr. Emeka. And just to briefly have you guys understand why he's our keynote speaker, a little bit about his accolades. He has over 35 years of experience in banking, including Citibank, with 25 years of experience where he helped start Citibanks in Africa. Then he has been in entrepreneurship, went into private equity. After that, he had 8 years of experience at UN Bank of Nigeria, where he ultimately was the bank CEO. Then after that, as of this February, he was appointed the board chairman of AFC, also known as Africa Finance Corporation. So with that being said, please give a round of applause for So I'm going to go ahead and let Emeka start the first question.
I know you've heard to Emeka already, I'm the second one. So for benefit of doubt, Emeka is second, this is first. So just to start.
So could you address your mic?
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so to start, Emeka, it's strange calling my name, but reflecting on your tenure at Union Bank and Citibank, what are some core principles that guide the transformation of institutions, especially in environments prone to economic and political turbulence?
Okay, well, is this working?
It's turned on?
It's working?
No. I think everything turned on.
Who's turning it on?
No. Wait, that one works, yeah.
Is it working?
No, you have two mics. You have two mics or one?
We have one mic.
Okay, that was your mic.
That's mine.
Yeah, so they need to give you a mic.
Yeah, you leave that there. You leave that one there. You leave that one there.
Okay, well, everyone, thanks for being here. I'm pleased to be here with you. It's an interesting position that I find myself in here today. One is, according to what I've seen in other sort of groups, panels, it's just me and two moderators. So I'm sandwiched in between two moderators. That's one. I just want to give you the sense of how tough this set of conversations will be. Two, you had a conversation around creatives, around culture before, right? And sometime after this, there's a gala, right? To which, by the way, I wasn't invited and I was I have something else. So this is in between those two things. And the third thing is I'm standing in for, well, not standing in for, but the governor of the state could make it. So that's also giving me the opportunity to be here. So it's, and this is a large crowd. Right? So just to give you a sense of how it's going. Now, the question you've asked is around.
So let me go again. Reflecting on your tenure at Union Bank and Citibank, what are some core principles that guide the transformation of institutions, especially in environments prone to economic or political turbulence?
Okay, thanks. So there are three things I think about this along three lines, right? One is people, right? All comes back to people. No matter what it is you want to do, you do have to have the right people, find them, identify them, and then, and let's say right means appropriate for what you want them to do or what they expect to do, and the absolute best people you can find to do what it is that you want them to do. And then give them the space to do what they can do and know how to do probably better than yourself. So get the right people, best people, empower them. That's one. Second is have the right kind of governance processes around what you're doing. Because whatever transformation you're doing has to be sustainable. Transformation is not one time. You can make a big change one time, but the world continues to evolve. Therefore, you have to continue to evolve and change and transform. Right? But yes, in a particular organization, there might be one opportunity for one big transformation, but it's a continuous journey, it never stops. Right? Because unless change stops, right, then it don't stop. You have to continuously evolve. The other thing is you and Residu as an organization have to find a way to make yourself relevant to your constituency. And your constituency might be customers, your stakeholders. And in order to do that, time is second, you have to try and foster what is a learning organization, right? So you have to go out, engage with your stakeholders, find out what's important to them, and incorporate people, I assume, and then continue to learn what's important so that when you do a transformation and when things change, when there's a crisis or when there's a disruption, either you have anticipated some aspect of it because you're going out there engaging with the world, or you have the ability, because you've got great people who have allowed to do what they can do best, you have the ability to react and to adapt to those changes that are coming through. So those are three things I say
Yeah, so I'm gonna actually dig deeper. So we talk about making sure companies are set up for crisis. I understand when the 2008 crisis happened, you were at Citibank. So that being said, do you have any examples or anything that you learned while your time at Citibank during the 2008 crisis, and how you helped the organization, continue during that disruption?
Well, I was at Citi, I was running Citi in Nigeria, right? The global crisis affected the whole world. Incidentally, Nigeria was not too much affected. But I can tell you a couple of things that I did. Citi has been around for, at that time, around for a couple of 100 years, right? When I talk about being relevant to your stakeholders, during that crisis, Citi, many of you probably don't know or didn't know, Citi did get affected by the crisis, and we had support from the government to enable them weather the crisis. But why would anybody do that? Right? It was because Citi had become an extremely relevant part of every of its stakeholders' space. So from a national perspective, from a global perspective, Citi was very much part of the financial infrastructure of the world. And that is not something that happened overnight. Citi operated in about 100 countries, but they had built that relevance over time. So when they hit a speed bump, it was, in my mind, it was not too difficult to come to a decision by people who could provide the support that, we're going to work with these people to get through this difficult time. So the most important thing is, one of the most important things is creating that relevance over time.
Yes, creating relevance, like you said, people, governance, and also, what was the last thing you said?
People, governance, and relevance. Those were the key things. But how to create that relevance is basically making sure that you're doing things that your customers, your stakeholders want, things that are important to them, whether it's today or in the future.
I think you touched upon the last question I have slightly, just to create room. This is a fireside chat. This would be with the audience to ask more questions.
I had one more question though. I know it's the last one, but so I have a question. This is personal because whenever I have these topics or this panel discussion, we talk about development in Africa. We always talk about risk. Like they always say, there's too much risk in Africa to invest, or the infrastructure is not good. But that's where AFC comes in. Like your main mission is to invest in infrastructure in Africa. So I guess moving forward from that conversation about risk, what are some of the advantages to perhaps investing in infrastructure in Africa versus other more high-income countries?
I guess you talk about risk, and we talked about it in the earlier panel, right, where if you think about risk or challenges, those in a way present opportunities, because basically if the risks and and you're able to identify, manage those risks, then they present an opportunity that you can take advantage of. When we talk about
I think something you said in our conversation is like when you're basically deficit, that's how.
yes, so that's the thing. The challenges are an opportunity where you find shortages, deficits. Basically, something's not working, right? And it's not working for a large number of people. What it tells you is that there is an opportunity to create a solution. And if you are able to create that solution for a large number of people, then that's the opportunity that you identify and create for yourself. So yes, there's risk, but risk and reward are two sides of the same coin. So that's something you're all familiar with.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you, Emeka. We're going to take questions, and please, if you have a question, just identify yourself by raising your hand. Questions?
It's time for the gala.
Okay, there's a question here.
A few years ago, Haiti tried to join the African Union. So I wanted to know, does the AFC only work in Africa or also like the Caribbean islands, America, Brazil? Because there's many Africans in Brazil, like Yorubas in Brazil, the African Americans, like Dominicans, Haitians, who all benefit from not only developing economically. So does the AFC work with like the diaspora as well, or only continental Africans?
AFC, African Finance Corporation, we work with everybody in Africa. So if you're diaspora, come to Africa, we'll work with you. If you're doing somewhere else, come to Africa, we'll work with you. So in Africa, once you're in Africa, once you're on the African continent, we'll work with you. But not outside. We work with the people, with the stakeholders outside to support people inside.
Okay, some more questions? Okay.
Hi, Nicole. My name is Arnold. I wanted to know a little bit more about some of your investments in infrastructure and how you're specifically de-risking future investments in outside capital to come into Africa. It seems like a big issue many investors have. Probably I can say specifically in the VC world is, again, the risk of going into Africa and the lack of ecosystems to support their investments. How are you guys de-risking that for them? And even if it is de-risking, how, I guess, are you convincing them that their investments will be okay and letting them know that the risk profile is similar to what they're used to?
You know, you partially answered the question. You talked about the absence, in some cases, of ecosystems. That's how we contribute to this de-risking. Supporting the development and construction of ecosystems. We did, for example, and someone mentioned, I think, in the last panel conversation, I was in Benin Republic last month. We had a series of AFC meetings there in Cotonou. And together with Arise, which is private sector, the Republic of Benin, without financing, what has been developed there is an industrial park. And in that industrial park, you have companies that have now come to settle and have created ecosystems within that. So we together with private sector and the public sector, have provided or created the enabling environment. So that is what the risks, if you will, the risk for a company. So for example, there's a company there that's manufacturing, starting all the way from raw cotton to finished shirts, t-shirts, polos that are being exported. I think they have a few customers in the US and elsewhere, but start from raw cotton, right? And they're doing that within that industrial park. So there's an ecosystem being developed. So that's what we do to work with the governments and, or part of what we do, private sector to develop those ecosystems which contribute to the risk.
Thank you.
Okay, the question? Yeah, good evening everyone. My name is Joshua, and my question really kind of touches on that you just gave, like building ecosystems out. Specifically, I'm interested in, two specific like technology verticals. I'm thinking like energy. I'm thinking, kind of like a lot of conversations we've been having and just I've been thinking about is like emerging technology. Obviously AI is really big, but the core infrastructure beneath the data centers and fiber optic cables and these kinds of infrastructure that are needed to kind of get Africa not just, so we don't get further left behind.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, I'd like to know how you're thinking about at a really high level, like incentivizing and creating the ecosystems around these kind of technologies so that, again, we don't go further behind.
I'm not sure I understand you, right? Because when you say us incentivizing.
Yes, like financing, just providing ecosystems and incentivizing. You talk about obviously people in the diaspora coming and investing in Africa. So how is that the AFC, thinking about helping to get maybe public-private partnerships, just funds, companies. I saw that Microsoft is doing something in Kenya trying to build data centers. Are there kind of high-level pushes, strategic pushes to kind of get more financing in Africa for kind of emerging technologies like this?
Well, what I can give you an example of is something that we did some time back. Because when you talk about data centers, I'll give you an example of something that we did. Right? I don't know if you know Min1, right? So we were an investor in Min1, so we provided financing for Min1 sometime back, early in the day when people felt this was extremely high risk, but the way we saw it, this was tech infrastructure for the country, and we supported it. So when we find that there's an opportunity, as I said, the risk is the opportunity, or the deficit is the opportunity, when we find those, and we evaluate them, and it makes sense, and you've got to have somebody who's driving it and who's credible, and it is something that is of scale, then we find ways to intermediate.
Is there more questions? Oh, okay.
Well, honestly, I have so many questions, but we're out of time. So I guess I'll do a fun one. So I know when we talked, you said after you started off in engineering, and you had a whole journey into banking. But I'll end with this because this is obviously Columbia MBA, lots of smart, even successful people. So you were the CEO of Union Bank of Nigeria. So tell us about what is one advice, or two advice, an easy question, that you would tell everyone else. Given that maybe you could relate to you, maybe you didn't start off in banking when you were in school, you were an engineer. So kind of maybe one or two words of advice.
Well, I sat on the last few minutes of the last panel, and what struck me was that the world has changed, but not by that much. And what I mean by that, because I heard people on this side talking about doing what their parents wanted, studying what their parents wanted, and there's a piece of advice, lie to your parents. That's not the advice I'm going to give. But it's a generational thing. The similarity I see, my generation, if you're good in the sciences, right, if it's maths, physics, chemistry, you go to engineering. If it was chemistry, biology, physics, medicine, right? If you're good in languages and things like that, you go to law, right? So it wasn't necessarily the parent driving you, but the environment is like, although the parent was behind that. And to personalize it, I have a brother who's a lawyer today, But he was good in sciences. Right? In fact, he was fantastic, outstanding. Right? So he's got a master's degree in engineering, and then he left that and went to law. He didn't like his parents, right? But he's a lawyer today. Now, you asked him about me. Let me say I was good, but I was biased towards the sciences, right? So I ended up my first year in engineering. Right? I don't know how many of you are engineers here, but I ended up my first year. I'm not an engineer. I did 1 year. It is not for me. I think I had 6 subjects. 3 I liked, 3 I utterly disliked. Right? And I just couldn't live it. But I didn't know one thing. I didn't like, and I do like numbers. I like playing with numbers. I like playing with money. Even if I don't have it, I like playing it. So that's what took me into finance, and from there into banking. So maybe, I don't know, maybe banking is for field engineers. That's one way to look at it. But seriously, and that also leads to something I was saying to somebody just before coming here. And one thing I've learned over time is there is no hurry to figure out your life. Right? Just figure it out as you go. Right? The same of us still trying to figure it out. So there's no hurry. So that's how I got into finance, into banking. I like to solve things. I like to solve puzzles. I like to fix things. So that's what's taken me to banking and the path that I followed in banking. Everywhere I went, everything I did, I went to solve a problem, right, for the institution. So I started in Nigeria, I left Nigeria, went to Niger, had to learn French, going in, run a bank, sell the bank, come back to Nigeria, go to Tanzania, start a bank for city, come back, try to buy a bank, come into Ghana, try to buy a bank in Ghana, get close, didn't work, but I learned a lot because we ended up not buying the bank when I see the city. We ended up not.
It's been an amazing day and a half. For those who came yesterday at least, we've had a lot of conversations around Africa. We've had a lot of positives to take away from these conversations. We have done a lot of soul searching, we've done a lot of digging. We've thought about what we could bring to the table all the way from here, our respective industries, and it's been an amazing day and a half. We talked about everything from healthcare frontier and how to navigate that all the way to digital frontiers. We talked about powering Africa. We talked about exploring Africa's beauty and fashion. We talked about food security. We talked about very relevant topics. And I hope that you can take away things from those that are not just going to linger and you forget them after this conversation. So keep those things within you. Make sure you play your part, like people have said today. In whatever industry you're in, I think there's something for each of us to take back. And even within that, we closed it with a panel on cultural fusion. We talked about resilience for institutions, and we got to decide finally who has the best jollof. We know this. But thank you guys. You've been an amazing group of attendees. And before we bring this to a close, I want to thank the people who are behind this. It's been a lot of painstaking hours. It's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of sleepless nights. And so for that, I'm going to call down the conference chairs of the Columbia Africa Conference 2024. And you just make your way down here. Thank you. And if there is space, why don't we invite the volunteers down here too? And so, as you see, this did not take one person, this did not take a small group of people, and this did not take the group you see in front of you alone. This is the work of not just one school, this is the work of 5 different schools within Columbia and the wider African community. And we will continue to expand to this team up to the point where we have a lot of schools represented next year we move to get climate school and the School of Architecture and the School of Journalism involved in the Columbia. I know a lot of people will not say some of these things, but we struggled a lot initially with sponsoring for this event. And when we go through our sponsor list, you will see that we had probably the fewest number of corporate sponsors we've had over the years, and that shows the strength of the school support that we have right now, that we were able to raise most of it from within the school. And that being said, I also want to give a massive thank you to all our sponsors who have been represented here in one way or the other, from our media sponsors to even our moderator at the end, who you might have seen the Afro Vibes moving around as well. So, Metal Foundation, represented by, he doesn't like me calling them ants, but I will call them ants. We've had a lot of people contribute towards the success of this, and we know that this is not the end. We're hoping that this is just the beginning of what can be a real Columbia African community that is represented every year, not just in the conference, but throughout all our events throughout the year. And with that, you will see more of that celebration tonight at the gala. I know a lot of you have things, so the Taylors were raising the prices this weekend. I'm not going to know why. So I see you guys there, and if you see any of us acting strange, just know that that is not our real face. We've been through a lot in this conference together, so I think it's time to get the peace, and you all have been a great crowd, and thank you so much for your participation in this. Thank you, and good night. I'm hoping you're going to take a selfie as well, so if you're going to just make your way down to the stage, or towards the front of them, and you go to the next stage. We're going to do a quick selfie. We're going to have the conference team line up on the first row. Thank you.